Welcome back to Anime Realm. This is my recap for the anime Sword of the Demon Hunter. If you enjoy my recaps, please think about subscribing. On a bitterly cold night, Suzu is forcibly dragged through the dirt and thrown into a ramshackle shed by her cruel father, his contempt for her unmistakable. With a voice devoid of warmth, he states outright that he wishes she had never been born. Without a second thought, he locks the door behind him, leaving her to endure the freezing night alone, as if she were nothing more than an afterthought. Not long after, her brother Jinta slips outside and runs to let her out. But when he opens the shed, he freezes because she's gone. Panic hits instantly, so he tears through the village in the dark, calling her name, looking everywhere like a man possessed, until he finally spots her crossing the old bridge at the edge of town. He runs to her, breath ragged, and tells her how sorry he is, sorry for not standing up to their father, sorry for being too weak to protect her, knowing full well that any attempt to protect her would only land him in trouble. Suzu was born with a demon eye in feudal Japan, has long been branded a cursed child, and treated as nothing more than a worthless pest. Aware that her fate is sealed with such an affliction, she tells Jinta to just go home without her. After a long, heavy moment of silence, Jinta, overwhelmed by love for his sister, declares that he cherishes her more than the rest of their family. So he takes her hand and pleads with her to run away with him. They take off together with no clue where they're headed, just putting the village behind them. Rain pours harder, and the cold bites deep into their skin. Eventually, Jinta finds an old ruined building, and they crawl inside, soaking wet and shaking, so they huddle close for warmth. Suzu passes out first, and just as Jinta's about to do the same, he notices a man approaching, and hears him say something about taking them in. Next thing Jinta knows, he's waking up on the man's back, still half asleep. Suzu walks silently beside him, holding the man's hand, relieved to see Jinta awake. The man sets him down, and they continue until they reach his village called Kadono, a community largely composed of blacksmiths renowned for forging katanas, all hard at work. The man then escorts Jinta and Suzu to his home, and as soon as the door swings open, his daughter darts out to greet him. Excited yet curious about the two children trailing behind, the man tells her that Jinta and Suzu will now be living with them. He asks his daughter if she's okay with this, and she lights up at the prospect, thrilled to have new friends to play with. She eagerly approaches Jinta and introduces herself as Shiryuki, hoping the three of them will get along splendidly from now on. That night, Jinta can't fall asleep, so Madoharu asks if something's bothering him. He's sitting nearby, cleaning his sword, so Jinta ends up asking if he's a samurai, but Madoharu says he's not. He tells Jinta he's actually a sentinel, and his job is to protect the people and places that matter most. Later, Jinta and Suzu head out to the river where they meet up with Shiryuki and Chitos. On the way back, Jinta brings up Yokazi, Shiryuki's mother, who helped him and Suzu stay in the village. Shiryuki explains that Yokazi isn't just her mom. She's the shrine maiden of Itsukihime, chosen by a fire supreme being, and no one's allowed to see her except the village chief and her sentinel, who also happens to be her husband Madoharu. The next morning, Jinta trains with Madoharu, but since he's still a rookie with the sword, he keeps getting knocked to the ground without even landing a hit. Madoharu doesn't go easy on him either, but tells him that if he keeps training, he'll get there eventually. Years go by, and Jinta ends up becoming the new sentinel for the shrine maiden. Now he's sitting in a meeting with the village officials and the maiden herself. She stays hidden behind a curtain as usual, and once the meeting begins, she starts by praising Jinta for how well he's handled recent demon threats. Jinta keeps it humble and says he's just doing his job. The last demon he fought had taken on human form and tried to sneak into the village. One of the officials starts looking uneasy after hearing that, and the others ask Jinta if he knows why a demon would try to do something like that. Someone suggests that the demon might have been after the shrine maiden, since there's a legend that says if a demon eats a maiden's liver, it becomes immortal. But it could also be after the Yore sword. That blade's been passed down through shrine maidens for generations, and it's a major artifact, so it would make sense that demons would target it too. One of them adds that the Yore was forged by one of the most skilled blacksmiths in recorded history, and it's rumored to have mystical powers sealed inside. If demons are truly after it, then things could get real bad for the village. so the chief tells everyone to stay alert. But Kiyomasa doesn't seem worried at all. He says there's nothing to be afraid of since both he and Jinta are guarding the maiden. But then he throws a jab and says he doesn't think Jinta's cut out for the job. That's enough to set Jinta off, and the two of them look like they're about to argue. But before it goes too far, the chief steps in, along with the maiden, and tells them both to shut it. The meeting wraps up, and everyone starts leaving the shrine, everyone except Jinta, since it's his job to stay and protect the shrine maiden. Once they're alone, the shrine maiden finally steps out of her room, and it turns out to be Shiryuki. Jinta immediately questions her, asking what the hell she's doing showing herself like that. She's supposed to keep hidden, but Shiryuki brushes it off because she and Jinta have known each other forever, and she doesn't see the point in pretending to be formal around him. She casually mentions that Suzu's here too, which catches Jinta off guard. The shrine is supposed to be off limits to outsiders, especially regular villagers like Suzu, so technically she's not supposed to be here at all. When they find Suzu asleep nearby, she looks exactly the same as she did years ago, like time hasn't touched her. She jumps up the moment she sees Jinta and lights up, happy to finally see her big brother again. He's been so busy hunting demons that she barely ever gets to spend time with him anymore. But even though Jinta's happy to see her too, he doesn't hold back and scolds her for sneaking into the shrine. She tries to argue, saying it's not fair that Jinta can see Shiryuki whenever he wants. But she can't. Still, rules are rules, and Jinta tells her flat out to go back home. After Suzu leaves, the village chief shows up again, saying he needs to talk to Shiryuki about something important. He asks Jinta to give them some space, but Jinta refuses at first. He's her sentinel, and he's supposed to stay close no matter what. But Shiryuki steps in and tells him to take the rest of the day off. After a short pause, he gives in and heads out. Meanwhile, beyond the village walls, two demons are tracking Suzu. Her demon eye caught their attention, and they've made her their next target. Later that evening, Shiryuki sneaks out of the shrine and meets up with Jinta because there's something serious she needs to get off her chest. Earlier, during her talk with the chief, he told her that she needs to start preparing to produce an heir just in case something happens to her. With the recent demon attacks, it's not that far-fetched. If she dies, someone has to take her place, so the decision was made, and she's going to marry Kiyomasa. He's the chief's son, and he's expected to take over the village one day anyway. Jinta finds himself conflicted by the news, and Shiryuki too is far from pleased. In a moment of vulnerable honesty, she confesses that she is in love with Jinta, and had even planned to ask him to run away together to start a new life. However, she knows he would never agree because Jinta had sworn an oath to protect this village, dedicating years of rigorous training to become strong enough to defend it. Shiryuki too took a solemn vow when she became the shrine maiden, so running away now would be nothing short of an insult to everything they have both sacrificed and built. More time passes, and Jinta finds himself called into another meeting. This time, it's to report a demon sighting in the forest. Without hesitation, he's assigned to take it down, and he gets ready to head out immediately. But just before he can leave, Kiyomasa steps in and blocks his path. He brings up the obvious, surely Jinta's heard by now that Shiryuki's going to marry him, so he doesn't get why the damn Jinta's acting like it doesn't bother him. Jinta keeps a straight face and tells him there's nothing to be upset about because all that matters to him is keeping the village safe and protecting the shrine maiden, and that's it. The crazy part is that Kiyomasa isn't even trying to gloat because he knows exactly how this looks. He knows Jinta and Shiryuki love each other, and even if he's the one marrying her, none of it feels right. It just feels messed up. But Jinta doesn't flinch because he's already made his choice, and without another word, he turns and leaves the village to handle his mission. Deep in the forest, it doesn't take long before the demon shows itself. It's a massive brute, and it comes at him fast. But before things kick off, Jinta asks if it's working alone because the report said there were supposed to be two. The demon Duga grins and says his partner had something else to take care of back in the village. That's not good, but Jinta has no choice but to deal with this one one first. He charges in and lands a brutal swing, slicing straight through one of the demon's arms. But instead of screaming in pain, Duga just backs up and laughs. He picks up the severed limb like it's nothing and tells Jinta he's impressed because not many people can land a hit like that. Meanwhile, back in the village, Suzu comes face to face with the second demon Taumi. She freezes on the spot, absolutely terrified, but Taumi just smiles and tells her there's no need to be afraid because after all Suzu's a demon too, just like her. Suzu immediately denies it and refuses to believe it, but Taumi can see right through her. She figures out fast that Suzu's unwavering love for Jinta must be preventing her from fully embracing her demonic nature, a notion that she finds both ironic and oppressive, as it implies Jinta has showered Suzu with so much affection that it stunts her transformation. Suzu loves Jinta more than anything, so hearing Taumi say that makes her feel calmer. She starts to relax a bit, and now that she isn't so scared anymore, Taumi makes her offer. She asks Suzu to join her, to use her power and help out. She promises she won't hurt her, and since everyone knows demons can't lie, she says Suzu can trust her. But Suzu shakes her head because she knows that even if Taumi means what she says, helping her might lead to Jinta getting hurt, and that's a risk she can't take. Taumi frowns, but she doesn't give up. Instead, she changes tactics and shows Suzu a vision. In the vision, Suzu sees Shiryuki undressing and preparing to do the wild deed in the shrine, and that this shit sight makes Suzu's stomach turn not because of what she's doing, but because it's not Jinta doing it with her. And that's what really guts her. She turns to Taumi, shaken, and asks if the vision she saw was real. Taumi explains that her ability lets her see into the future, and she can project those visions into someone else's mind, which is exactly what Suzu just experienced. But if she still doesn't believe it, Taumi says she's more than willing to take her to the shrine right now, so she can see the whole hot show with her own eyes. Meanwhile, out in the woods, Jinta is still locked in combat with Duga. But before they clash again, he stops and demands to know why demons attack humans. So Duga replies simply that each demon has a purpose, and his purpose is to stall Jinta. Endowed with the power of assimilation, Duga can consume other demons to acquire their abilities and even reshape his own body at will. Jinta doesn't have time to sit and chat, so he launches forward, determined to end the fight in one strike. But as soon as he moves in, Duga smashes his arm clean off, and when Jinta tries to counter by aiming for the neck, Duga bites down on the blade and shatters it in one snap. It should have been over, and Jinta should have died right there. But at the last second, Jinta grabs a shard from the broken sword, and with all the strength he has left, he slams it straight into Duga's heart. In a surprising twist, Duga accepts his defeat with a grim sort of satisfaction, and he reveals that his partner demon possesses foresight, having seen 170 years into the future, and according to her vision, the mightiest demon of all time resides here, a revelation that makes Jinta suspect she's referring to Suzu. But before he can move, Duga says he's got one last parting gift for him. Suddenly, his severed arm springs to life, grabs Jinta's head, and squeezes it tight until he blacks out. Back at the shrine, Kiyomasa is already on top of Shiryuki. All he needs to do is finish the job, get her pregnant, and secure the heir. With Jinta off on his mission, it's the perfect time. Otherwise, the poor guy would have had to sit outside and listen, while Shiryuki moaning from inside the shrine. And as messed up as it is, Kiyomasa already feels guilty enough. But before any damn thing can happen, the curtains rip open and Taumi appears, dragging Suzu behind her to show her exactly what the hell is going down, and that shit show makes Suzu breaks. In the meantime, Jinta wakes up in the middle of the forest. Somehow, his arm is back, restored like nothing ever happened, but there's no time to question it. If Taumi really made it into the village, then Suzu could already be in danger, so he gets up and takes off running, full speed toward home. At the same time, Suzu is stuck trying to process everything she just saw. Watching Shiryuki and Jinta in love was already hard, but she swallowed it all for the sake of Jinta's happiness. She even refused to grow up, kept herself frozen in that same small body, just so she wouldn't be a burden on their relationship. But now she finds out Shiryuki is marrying someone else, so that was it. That was the last crack before everything shattered, and her mind breaks because she couldn't believe Shiryuki would throw Jinta away like that. Then, with a few twisted words from Taumi, Suzu completely snaps and decides that Shiryuki has to die. Her demon power erupts like wildfire, and the entire room floods with black smoke, and her body begins to change, maturing into her adult form in a matter of seconds. Kiyomasa grabs the legendary sword and charges at her, but before he can even swing, Taumi steps in and knocks him out cold. Then she drags him outside, saying she has her own plans for him. And just like that, Shiryuki is left face to face with Suzu. Not long after, Jinta arrives at the shrine, relieved to find that Shiryuki is still alive. He rushes to embrace her, only for his relief to turn to horror because a split second later, Suzu slashes off Shiryuki's head. Stunned into silence, Jinta watches as Suzu steps from the shadows, holding the severed head in her grasp like it's nothing. When he demands to know why she did it, Suzu launches into her explanation about the marriage, about the betrayal, about how it wasn't fair. But Jinta doesn't care because he already knew, and even if he didn't, it still doesn't justify killing her. So at that moment, he realizes that the Suzu he once cared for has vanished, and now with Shiryuki dead, Jinta realizes he has nothing left to care about. Only vengeance. As the battle within him intensifies, a demonic arm begins to merge with the rest of Jinta's body, transforming him into something altogether different. His expression turns ice cold, and his eyes are filled with nothing but hate. And when he looks at Suzu now, it's not with sadness, it's with pure disgust. She can't understand why, because all she ever wanted was to make him happy, and that's all she tried to do. But the look in his eyes tells her everything. He's done with her, just like everyone else. So she decides to end it. If Jinta's going to turn his back on her, then she'll kill him too, and she drives her blade into his stomach. But nothing happens, and Jinta doesn't even flinch. So in the next second, he drives his fist straight through her chest. Suzu collapses, gasping, blood pouring out of her. But she's not dead yet. So as Jinta moves in to finish her, Taumi throws herself in the way. She takes the full hit, sacrificing herself to save Suzu one last time. As she starts fading, she tells Suzu to leave and run while she still can. Suzu stumbles away, weak and broken, but alive. And just before she disappears, she turns back one final time and tells Jinta that she has nothing left and that this world took everything from her, and no matter how long it takes, she'll be back. And when she returns, she'll burn it all to the ground, and on the final day, she'll kill him for betraying her. Hearing her vow, Taumi's eyes gleam with wild excitement, because she believes that by fulfilling Suzu's promise of vengeance, she has finally accomplished her purpose. Her maniacal laughter reverberates, inciting Jinta's fury as he struggles to understand how the hell they could regard needless death as their ultimate goal. Taumi, sensing his outrage, calmly reveals that in the far future she saw, demons don't exist anymore. Humans had evolved so far that demons faded into myth. But now, with someone like Suzu alive and fully awakened, the bloodline won't end, and she smiles one last time and fades away for good. Later, tragedy strikes in Kadono as a massive fire devastates the land and homes. Amid the ruins, Jinta cradles the lifeless body of the princess, consumed by guilt for failing to protect her, and he fervently confesses his love for her. The following morning, while the villagers begin rebuilding from the ashes, Jinta prepares to head out. That's when the village leader greets him warmly and learns of his plans to venture forth and defend humanity against the looming threat of a demon lord, whom some fear might even be Suzu. The old man, with sorrow in his eyes, wonders if Jinta can truly bring himself to slay his own sister. In response, Jinta bitterly declares that he has no choice but to harbor hatred for the one who murdered the woman he loved, even as he hopes for a more merciful resolution to come. But before departing, the village head presents Jinta with a revered Yarei sword, declaring that henceforth he shall be known as Jinya, though Jinta feels unworthy of such an honor. The elder explains that the demise of the Itsukihime lineage left a void that only someone of Jinta's character could fill. In a moment of contrition, the old man falls to his knees and apologizes for forcing the princess into marriage with Kiyomasa, insisting that his actions were meant only to appease his son, not to benefit Kadono. Jinta, despite the bitterness in his heart, accepts the apology and helps the man up, then sets off on his journey with the hope of one day saving the people from the coming calamity. As he departs, The chief vows to erect a shrine in his honor and name it Jinta Shrine so that if he ever returns, the village will remember the hero he once was. But before he leaves, Chidos rushes up to him, tearfully reminding him that she still sees him as the caring big brother he used to be. Gently, Jinta reassures her that he will return someday. With the village fading into the distance behind him, Jinta reflects on the demon's unsettling contentment in fulfilling its grim purpose. Steeling himself for the long and arduous journey ahead, he marches onward. After many years of travel, he finally arrives at a remote temple, where he meets a young girl whom he believes to be the temple's Miko. By the 1850s, Jinta, now known as Jinya, had built a strong reputation as a demon slayer. One day, he's summoned by a wealthy man for what seems like a major assignment. The man introduces Jinya to his assistant Zenji, and tells him that if he needs any more info, Zenji's the guy to ask. After that, the man steps out, leaving the two of them alone. Zenji then greets Jinya politely and asks how much he's been told already. Jinya says the man already gave him the rundown about his precious daughter Natsu, and how he's worried about some demon that's been lurking around lately. But apparently, there's a bit more to it. Jinya's actual role is going to be serving as Natsu's personal guard, because ever since she hit 13, she's been hearing some creepy voice outside her room at night. The demon keeps saying creepy stuff like "return my daughter to me," and now she's terrified it's going to snatch her. But before Zenji could go into more detail, the door burst open, and Natsu stormed in, clearly upset and looking for Zenji. Her eyes immediately lock onto Jinya, and she assumes this must be the bodyguard her father mentioned. But when Jinya tries to introduce himself, she shuts him down fast. She wants nothing to do with him and tells him to get lost, accusing him of being some sketchy wannabe demon hunter just trying to scam her family. Zenji tries to calm her down and explains that her father searched high and low for someone legit, and that Jinya is the real deal. But Natsu isn't having any of it. She demands that Zenji throw him out. That night, Natsu's still wide awake, too anxious to sleep. She's convinced the demon is coming back, so Zenji decides to keep watch outside her room to help her feel safe. Jinya would have been the smarter choice for this, but since she basically kicked him out, Zenji's stuck taking his place. He's not exactly confident he'd be any good in a demon fight, but he promises to stay right there until morning if it helps her sleep better. Natsu really appreciates him being there, but she's still disappointed. Even Zenji seems like he doesn't totally believe her story. Her dad didn't believe her either, because why else would he hire some random wandering samurai instead of someone trusted? Zenji admits he doesn't know if her father truly believes in demons, but what he can say for sure is that the man genuinely cares about her. He wants her safe, even if they don't share blood. Right then, Natsu hears that same creepy voice again, and that damn voice makes her almost piss herself. She panics and pleads with Zenji to do something, but the second he lays eyes on the demon, he's just as shaken as she is. He tells Natsu to stay locked in her room while he tries to handle the situation himself. Except he has absolutely no clue how the hell he's supposed to fight something like this. The demon then moves closer, so Zenji braces for the worst, but right before its claws reach him, the damn thing's arm flies off clean in a flash. Jinya then steps out of the shadows, calmly asking the demon to identify itself. But when it doesn't respond, he doesn't wait around. With one smooth, heavy strike, he cuts it clean in two. The demon collapses and vanishes into black smoke, which means for now, Natsu and Zenji are safe. Natsu instantly recognizes Jinya as the guy she threw out earlier, and he turns to her, asking if she still thinks he's some kind of con artist. She stares at the fading smoke and asks if the demon is really gone. But Jinya tells her it's not that simple. In his experience, demons don't stay dead unless they fade into white mist, so the fact that this one turned black, it's definitely coming back. The next day, Zenji formally thanks Jinya for saving them. And since they both know the demon's not done yet, Zenji asks him to stay another night. Jinya agrees without hesitation, but he has a few questions, specifically about Natsu. Ever since he heard that thing whisper "return my daughter to me," he's been wondering if there's something deeper going on. Zenji nods and starts explaining. Natsu's biological parents were distant relatives of the boss, but they passed away some years back. The boss took her in and raised her like she was his own. And if Jinya's worried she might be some sort of demon child, Zenji is quick to shut that idea down. If she were, there's no way the boss would have taken her in. His hatred for demons runs deep because his wife was killed by one. And after that, his son disappeared and was never seen again. The man's lost everything to demons, and he despises them with every part of his soul. That evening during dinner, Natsu sits across from her father. He asks how things are going with her new bodyguard. She admits that she had her doubts about Jinya at first, but after what she saw last night, she's convinced that he's legit. Still, she wants to know why her father chose him of all people. He leans back and explains that lately, there have been more demon sightings around Edo Town. And not just that, there's also been talk of a wandering swordsman who can kill any demon with a single blow, as long as he gets paid. Her father checked into it himself, and the rumors were true. That swordsman is Jinya, and he knew no one else would be better suited to protect his daughter. Natsu feels relieved knowing her father actually believed her about the demon, because his trust means more to her than anything. And ever since he took her in, she's been genuinely happy. But even with that, it hasn't been easy. She's constantly had to deal with the cruel things people say about her behind her back, and it's worn her down. Later that evening as planned, Zenji and Jinya are sitting near Natsu's room to keep watch. Out of nowhere, Natsu steps out and asks for Jinya's name, since she never actually let him introduce himself properly before. Now that she sees how much her father trusts him, she's decided to trust him too. Jinya notices right away how deeply Natsu cares about her adoptive father Juyuzu. But honestly, it makes sense. He gave her a home when she had nowhere else to go, so of course she's grateful. While they're on the subject, Jinya brings up something he's been wondering about. He asks her if she knows anything about the rumors surrounding Juyuzu's missing son. But the moment he says it, Natsu snaps and says she doesn't know anything, her voice sharp and defensive. Clearly, it's not something she's ready to talk about, so Jinya doesn't push it. He backs off, deciding it's not worth upsetting her right now. But then Natsu asks if it's even possible for a demon and a human to have a child, and Jinya tells her it is. That answer seems to shake her a bit, and she starts wondering out loud if maybe she is the daughter of that demon that's been stalking her. But Jinya shuts that idea down immediately. He tells her there's no way she's related to that thing. She asks him how he can be so sure, and Jinya explains that he's crossed paths with this demon before, so he knows what it is, and he knows it's not her mother. He then explains that demons can be born in a few different ways. Some come from two demons, others from a demon and a human. But in rarer cases, a demon doesn't need parents at all. Sometimes, demons just appear. When heavy emotions, usually anger, grief, or hate, build up inside people and fester long enough, they can take shape and manifest into creatures like the one that's been haunting her. Right then, the demon shows up again, and Natsu starts to panic. But Jinya calmly walks toward the thing and tries talking to it, asking for its name. But it's clearly not the type that can think, let alone speak. As it lunges at him, Jinya smacks it clean across the face and pins it straight into the ground like it's nothing. Zenji shouts to Jinya to just finish the damn thing already, but Jinya shakes his head and says there's no point, it'll just come back. Natsu, completely confused, asks why. So Jinya explains that this thing wasn't summoned or sent. It was born, and its birth came from her emotions. It manifested because deep down Natsu believed that if something terrifying happened, like a demon attack, it would make her father pay more attention to her. At first, Natsu denies it. She doesn't want to believe she's responsible for all this. But as she thinks about it, every word Jinya says starts hitting too close to home. All she ever really wanted was to be seen as Juyuzu's real daughter. She thought if she was in danger, if she was vulnerable enough, maybe then, maybe finally, he'd treat her like family. And somehow, out of those feelings, this monster appeared. Jinya tells her that the only real way to get rid of the demon is to get a grip on her feelings, to face them instead of hiding behind them. Natsu says she doesn't even know how to begin doing that, so Jinya tells her it's not that complicated. She just needs to be honest and accept how she feels, then look him in the eye and ask him to end it. Natsu takes a moment, and in that silence, everything becomes clear. She just wanted to be loved by Juyuzu, like she mattered to him for real. But somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that he didn't, and he will never would. So she started believing that if she were in danger, maybe he'd finally see her. And now that twisted, desperate part of her is standing right in front of her in the shape of this thing. So in some way, this demon is her. But Zenji steps in before she gets lost in that guilt. He tells her not to let that thought get to her. Sure, the demon came from her pain, but what matters now is moving past it. He reminds her that Juyuzu does love her, more than she knows, and she loves him back just as much, but neither of them has ever been good at showing it. Zenji promises to help her work through that from now on, and hearing that finally gives her the strength to let go of the feelings that created the demon in the first place. Then, with a deep breath, Natsu tells Jinta to end it. And without hesitation, Jinta draws his blade and slices the creature clean in two. This time, it fades into a soft white mist, and that's the sign Jinta was waiting for, and the demon won't be coming back. Or so it seems, because later that night, once Natsu is sound asleep, something unexpected happens. The demon's form starts to reappear. Jinta, who stayed up just in case, isn't surprised because he suspected this might happen. If the demon had been made purely from Natsu's emotions, then it should have vanished the second she let go. But it didn't, which means someone else's pain must have been part of it too. And in this house, in this region, the only other person who ever came close to becoming a demon was Juyusu's late wife. Then, with Natsu's feelings no longer fueling it, the demon starts to fall apart, and it's struggling to keep its form together. But as it cries out for its daughter again, it doesn't call for Natsu, it calls for Suzu. That's when everything clicks. Jinta isn't just some wandering swordsman, he's Juyusu's long-lost son. And this demon, it's Suzu and Jinta's mother. The thing is, Jinta doesn't really remember much about his mother from when she was alive. But even so, seeing what she became hurts him, so the only thing he can do now is set her free, to give her the peace she was never able to find on her own. The next morning, Jinta gets ready to leave. As he's heading out, Zenji and Natsu come to see him off and thank him one more time. But Jinta just waves it off, saying he's already been paid, and truth be told, this was something he needed to do anyway. Natsu tilts her head confused, so Jinta explains that with age comes perspective. Looking back now, he can see things more clearly than he ever could back then. He always thought taking Suzu and running away was the right thing to do. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but he never stopped to think how that choice might have affected the people he left behind, or the world they were part of. Natsu still doesn't really get it, so Jinta just smiles and tells her to never take her father's kindness for granted. He then turns around and walks off, and a short moment later, Juyusu steps outside. Zenji asks why he didn't come out sooner to say goodbye, but Juyusu shrugs. He didn't need to because he already knew Jinta would handle everything. Zenji asks how he could be so sure. Why put so much faith in a guy he barely knows? But Juyusu simply says that it's only natural for a father to believe in his son. They still haven't figured out that Jinta is his son, and he doesn't plan to explain anything to them. Then he tells Zenji to quit standing around and get back to work before he ends up demoted. Not wanting to push his luck, Zenji hurries off to his duties, leaving Juyusu standing there alone. Right before he turns to leave, Natsu calls out to him. She asks if there's anything she can do to help around the estate. He raises an eyebrow and asks why she's suddenly offering. She says Jinta told her she should try to repay her father's kindness, and that gets a rare smile out of Juyusu. It means a lot to him to know that Jinta still sees him as someone worth respecting. But he gently tells her that she doesn't owe him anything, because the best thing a child can ever do for a parent is live a good, happy life. He then goes inside, leaving Natsu so happy by his words, but she still wants to help around, so she goes after him. The story then moves forward to the year 1853, where we find Jinta seated at a modest soba shop, waiting for his meal. The owner's daughter carefully brings the soba to his table, and her father watches with quiet pride, pleased to see that she's learning the ropes. The shop owner strikes up a conversation, mentioning that there's been disturbing talk lately, rumors about a serial killer haunting the streets. With a worried glance at his daughter, he admits it's starting to make him nervous. He sighs and says he wishes the emperor would just pull himself together already, but Jinta quickly tells him to watch his mouth. The owner agrees, laughing awkwardly. Last thing he wants is for his shop to be burned down barely 10 days after opening. He admits he actually got this place for cheap after buying it from the previous owner. But now he's wondering why Jinta's been showing up for soba 5 days in a row, considering how empty the place always is. His daughter warns him that he's probably going to scare off the one customer they do have, but the owner waves it off, saying they're just making small talk. Then he turns to Jinta and asks how the soba tastes. Jinta gives it a straight answer. It's not bad, just plain. The owner chuckles and admits that he doesn't have much talent for cooking. He only makes soba because he loves it. Jinta can't help but ask why he even opened a shop, and the man simply says he had his reasons. After finishing his meal, Jinta pays the bill, and the owner casually notes that he seems to be doing all right financially for a Ronin. Jinya shrugs and says he earns his money by slaying demons. The owner laughs, thinking Jinya is joking, but Jinya just heads for the door without another word. Before he can leave, the owner stops him and brings up something strange. According to the rumors, this so-called slasher doesn't use a sword. Every body they've found so far has been torn to shreds, completely mangled. What's worse is the numbers don't line up. More people have gone missing than bodies recovered. So folks are starting to believe it's not a human doing this. They're saying it has to be demons. Jinya asks where these incidents usually happen, and the owner tells him the sightings have been around the Edabashi area. As Jinya steps out, the daughter calls out to him, asking him to be careful, but he simply replies that he's not a kid. That night, Jinya positions himself by a bridge, waiting in the shadows for the demon to show up. Hours go by, but there's no sign of anything unusual. Just as he's about to leave, a woman's scream echoes through the night, and without hesitation, Jinya bolts toward the sound. When Jinya arrives at the scene, he finds several mangled corpses sprawled across the ground, but no sign of the demon. He glances around, confused because he definitely heard a woman scream, but there's not a single woman in sight. As he begins scanning the area more closely, something invisible lashes out at him, but Jinya barely dodges in time. The invisible demon strikes again, and this time, Jinya manages to block the blow. But before he can retaliate, the demon vanishes and reappears behind him, landing a hit that cuts him. Annoyed now, Jinya morphs his arm into its transformed state, relieved that no one's around to witness this. The demon charges once more, but this time Jinya counters, shattering its blade in the process. The creature tries to escape, but Jinya lands a deep slash before it can flee and calls it the Slasher. Hearing the name, the demon suddenly stops and becomes visible, revealing himself. Jinya narrows his eyes and demands a name, warning that if he doesn't get one, the next swing will be fatal. The demon finally introduces himself as Mosuk, so Jinya doesn't hesitate and moves in to finish him off. But Mosuk throws up his hands and says he doesn't want to fight. Jinya halts, confused because if he didn't want to fight, then why attack? Mosuk explains that he thought Jinya was the serial killer. He'd heard the same rumors about a demon behind the murders, so he followed a strong demonic scent and ran into Jinya. The moment Jinya called him the Slasher, he realized he'd made a mistake. Still confused, Jinya asks why a demon would be hunting down a killer in the first place. Mosuk replies that this isn't the place for a chat because someone might spot them here, so they should talk somewhere private. Cut to the two of them sitting inside Mosuk's home, where the demon now looks entirely human. Mosuk then explains that as demons get older, many choose to live quiet lives by blending into society. They don't exactly lie, but they do hide the truth, and Jinya knows that much already. Mosuk then pours them both some cheap liquor and assures Jinya it's not poisoned. But Jinya says that it wouldn't matter because poison wouldn't kill him anyway. As they drink, Mosuk explains that he's just a regular villager, scraping by in a dingy back alley house, but Jinya knows better. Mosuk is a demon, a rare kind capable of completely erasing his presence from the world, and Mosuk explains that his ability is called invisibility. He's one of the superior demons, the kind that's lived for over a century. Jinya's surprised because he expected someone that old to be a lot stronger. But Mosuk chuckles and explains that the title superior refers to their awakened abilities, not their raw strength. In fact, some superior demons like him are physically weaker and slower than even the average demon. Jinya gets the sense that Mosuk really isn't the killer, and Mosuk knows Jinya isn't either. Jinya decides to believe him, but something still doesn't sit right. If Mosuk thought he was the Slasher, why did he go straight for the kill instead of confirming it first? Mosuk admits it was personal and asks Jinya if he's heard the rumors about the disappearances. Jinya says that he has, and he even confirmed it himself earlier when he heard a woman scream but found no trace of her body. That's when Mosuk tells him the truth. The Slasher only kills men on the spot, but women are abducted. Jinya asks how he can be so sure, so Mosuk clenches his fist and tells him that the demon took his wife. Her name was Hatsu, and she was a kind-hearted human, and she accepted him even though he was a demon. A month ago, she vanished without a trace. 10 days later, her body washed up by the Kanda River. The officer he spoke to said she'd been horribly violated before she died. Mosuk's voice shakes as he talks. Hatsu was a bright light, sweet, sociable, and the only one who ever looked at him with genuine love. And she didn't deserve what happened to her. Mosuk admits he's never cared much for humans, but he loved her with everything he had. Now, all he feels is rage. pure hatred for the thing that took her from him in such a vile, unforgivable way, and he swears that he'll get revenge, so he asks Jinta to step aside, to leave the killer to him. But Jinta refuses, so Masuke asks why, and Jinta simply tells him that it's his job to slay demons. Masuke gets it, so in that case, they'll do this together. But when they find the slasher, he wants to be the one to finish it. That's when Jinta stops him and asks if revenge is really what he's chasing. Masuke stares at him for a second, then asks if he doubts him. Jinta says no, it's not about doubt. But no matter who's behind this, human or demon, someone's life is going to be taken. So you need to be sure you're ready to carry that weight. Masuke tells him demons don't lie, not even to ourselves, and that goes for how we feel too. And with that, Jinta agrees that they'll handle this together. The next night, we see the two of them scouring the city, gathering information about the slasher. They question everyone they can, but come up with nothing. It's frustrating, and they're not exactly thrilled about their lack of progress, but they know they'll have to keep pushing. Later on, the two of them are back at Masuke's place, sharing some sake, and Masuke decides to ask Jinta a question that's been on his mind: why does he hunt his own kind? Jinta says it's mostly for the money, and there's no shortage of humans who hate demons, and they're willing to pay a pretty sum to see them wiped out. Masuke figures there's more to it than that though, because he doesn't see Jinta as the kind of guy who kills without reason, so he presses him about the real reason. Jinta leans back and says it's also about power because he's on a mission to stop a certain demon. And that surprises Masuke because Jinta did say that he wants to stop it, not kill it. Jinta then tells him that he was born human, but after he watched a demon murder the woman he loved, something in him broke, and he turned into what he is now. That's why killing demons who threaten humans feels so natural to him. Masuke is stunned because even after all that shit, Jinta still wants to spare the one who destroyed his life. Jinta says he won't know what to do until the day he finally faces that demon. Until then, he needs strength first. Masuke admits it's a lot to unpack, but Jinta just says that he is being spineless. Then Jinta turns the question around. Once Masuke gets his revenge, what's he planning to do? Masuke goes quiet for a second, then says he never wanted any of this, and the only reason he tried living like a human was because he hates violence, and he never wanted to be hunted by humans. Also, he never wanted to fight other demons either because all he really wanted was a quiet life with the woman he loved. He says once this is over, he's going back into hiding. He'll tend to Hatsu's grave, and that'll be the end of it. Jinta then remembers something Masuke said earlier about him, that he's not the kind of person who does things without a good reason. But that's not true because he is carrying a mindless hatred for his sister. The next day, we see Jinta back at the usual soba shop, quietly eating his lunch. The owner's daughter walks over and casually asks if he's had any luck tracking down the slasher, but he tells her that things aren't going so well. The owner then grumbles that making a living is damn near impossible these days. Jinta agrees, then nods toward the girl and says that with a cute waitress like Afu, they should be packed by now. But maybe people in Edo were just too busy to notice, so the owner smiled, glad someone thought his daughter was beautiful. Jinta says with confidence that 8 out of 10 people would probably agree with him, and the owner grins, telling him he's got good taste. But Afu quickly steps in and tells her father not to get ahead of himself. He reminds her loudly that she's never even had a relationship before, saying maybe this is a good chance for her. Embarrassed, Afu cuts him off, asking him not to put Jinta on the spot. She tells him not to worry because she'll leave the nest when the time is right, but for now, she just wants a little more time to be his daughter. Her father quiets down, understanding what she means. She then turns to Jinta with an apologetic smile and says sorry about all that, but Jinta doesn't mind one bit. In fact, he says she's lucky to have a father like that. She's proud of her old man, but it makes her wonder what Jinta's father was like. He explains that he has a younger sister, but their father never treated her right, said she didn't belong in the family and beat her for things she couldn't control. That's why Jinta took her and ran away from home, but it was a long time ago. She gently asks him if he hates his father for that, but Jinta says no, and he gets it now why his father acted the way he did. It doesn't make it right, but he understands. Later that night, Jinta is once again out patrolling with Masuke, searching for any signs of the slasher. But the trail is cold and nothing so far. Masuke mentions that there haven't been any new sightings recently, so there's no point in wandering around blind. Just then, he notices a figure standing by a tree, and it turns out to be Afu. Jinta tells him she's the daughter of the soba shop he always visits, and Mosuke quietly notes that it's not safe for her to be out this late. So Jinta nods and starts walking toward her. She then looks up and asks what he was doing out there by himself. But then Jinta notices that Mosuke has already turned invisible again and tells him quietly to escort her just in case, because if the slasher really is still lurking, it'd be bad if she ran into it alone. Jinta then asks Ofu what she's doing out here at this hour. She smiles and says she was just out admiring the cherry blossoms, but Jinta points out these aren't cherry blossoms, they're willows. She laughs a little and gently corrects him, saying that these are called snow willows. Technically, they aren't true willows, and they're not quite cherry blossoms either. They just resemble willows in how they hang, but they belong to the same family as cherries. So basically, it's not a cherry blossom, and it's not a willow. It's a little bit of both, and yet neither. Jinta looks at it for a moment and says it's a pitiful kind of plant. But Ofu disagrees, and she thinks it's beautiful. Even if it doesn't perfectly fit into either category, it still blooms lovely flowers every year. She doesn't know what the plant feels exactly, but if it were really sad and empty, it wouldn't keep blooming the way it does. So no, it doesn't need his pity because it'll keep blooming every spring, no matter what people call it, and that's just how it lives. Jinta looked at the flower again and realized she was right. That really was its way of life. He then tells her they should head back because her father's probably worried sick by now, and she nods. As Ofu and Jinta strolled to her place, Ofu mentioned that he seriously needed to chill more often. He raised an eyebrow, wondering if he really seemed that wound up, and she shot back that yeah, he totally had that broody, overthinking energy, always pushing himself past the limit. He couldn't argue with that, and he admitted she might be right. His whole life revolved around one damn thing, the purpose he was born to carry out. She has no idea what this purpose even is, but she tells him he should ease up once in a while. Life's gotta be dull if all he does is chase after some goal non-stop. Still in his mind, that's all he's got. And he tells her flat out that he can't take her advice, not even if he wanted to. A second later, she notices some flowers along the path and stops to admire them, pointing out that they're winter daphnes. She explains that these blooms start budding in the fall and tough it out through winter, only to bloom come spring, so that bloom means spring's officially arrived. She then points to another patch, and when she tries to tell him what kind they are, he tells her that they're chickweed. He mentions that boiling chickweed stalks makes a great stomach remedy. Back in his village, it was a go-to cure, especially for a childhood friend of his who loved sweets so much that she'd always end up with stomachaches. Ofu laughs, saying that girl sounds like a fun one, and he admits he was always dancing to her rhythm. Hearing that, Ofu starts to think there's more to his story than he lets on. He enjoys soba, he stops to admire flowers, he holds on to warm memories from the past. Clearly, he's more than just someone chasing a purpose. She gently tells him that being so locked in on one goal is blinding him to the rest of the world. She asks him to slow down sometimes, take a moment to live in the now. If he does, she's sure he'll see things he's never noticed before. Not long after, they arrive at her house and notice that the lights are still on, so Jinta realizes her dad must have stayed up waiting for her. She then thanks him for walking her home, and as she turns to leave, he asks if she'll teach him more about flowers sometime, but next time preferably while the sun's still out. She smiles and agrees, then heads inside. That's when Mosuke turns off his invisibility and comments that Ofu seems like a good woman. Jinta nearly jumps, completely shocked that Mosuke had been tailing him the whole time. Mosuke dodges the question and walks off, saying he's heading out to keep looking for the slasher. And once again, the night ends with Jinta camping out on the bridge, waiting in silence for the killer to show. A drunk guy then stumbles past Jinta, and right then, the slasher shows up out of nowhere and attacks him. The woman behind them drops to her knees in shock, and that's when Jinta finally gets a good look at the slasher for the first time. It lunges at him, but he blocks the strike, and the girl, still in disbelief, starts to panic. Jinta warns her to stay put if she wants to stay alive. Then he moves the fight away from her to keep her out of harm's way. But the slasher sees an opening and tries to circle back and go after the girl. Before it can get close, Mosuke jumps in and pulls her to safety, while Jinta follows up with a counterattack. Realizing it's completely outmatched, the slasher decides to bail and shoots off into the air to escape. After it's gone, Jinta apologizes to Mosuke for letting it slip away, but Mosuke brushes it off, saying it was tougher than he thought it'd be. Still, he's going to track it to find out where it's hiding. Jinta tells him to be careful and keep his distance, and Masuke nods, assuring him he has no plans of dying anytime soon. He takes off after it, and once he's gone, the girl behind Jinta asks for a hand getting up. He helps her up, and she gives him a look, saying his grumpy attitude really takes her back. She wonders if he still remembers her, and when he looks closer, he realizes it's Natsu. She's happy he still recognizes her, and he points out how much she's changed. It's been 3 years after all, and she's surprised that he hasn't aged a bit. He jokes that he's immune to aging, and she laughs it off like he's messing with her. Curious, he asks what she's doing out here this late, and she explains she was heading home after dropping off a delivery to one of their regular customers. He notes again how different she seems. Her smile looks more natural now, and she tells him that just proves she's not a kid anymore. Right then, Zenji shows up and teases her, saying she's not quite an adult yet, which clearly catches her off guard. He then spots Jinta and instantly jumps to conclusions, asking if the two of them are wrapped up in some kind of romance. Jinta quickly shuts that down, telling him Natsu just got attacked by a serial killer. Zenji then notices the body nearby and totally freaks out. He suggests they call for the authorities, but Natsu says that won't help because this was the work of a demon. Jinta confirms it, saying it's the same demon he's been chasing for a while, and Natsu just got caught in the crossfire. So Zenji then jokes that Jinta really has a habit of surrounding himself with demons, and Natsu turns to ask how he's making a living these days. He told her he was still working as a demon-slaying Ronin, and if she ever wanted to see him again, she could find him at a soba shop in Fukugawa called Kihei. He even offered her a discount if she stopped by. Since her escort was already here, he figured it was time to go, but before parting, she thanked him for saving her life. As Jinta was walking off, Zenji called out one last piece of advice. If Jinta was still looking for demons, he might want to check out Teramachi Temple. The place had been abandoned ever since the head priest passed away, and locals were saying they'd been hearing a woman's voice echoing from inside. Rumors were spreading that something unnatural might be living there. Meanwhile, Masuke is still tracking the demon through the streets, but he ends up losing it. Just then, a woman's scream cuts through the night, and he rushes toward the sound, only to spot the demon carrying someone. It instantly reminds him of his wife Hatsu, and the rage he's been holding in finally explodes. He chases the demon all the way to Teramachi Temple, slips inside using his invisibility, and what he sees in there leaves him shaking with fury. The demon is devouring the woman it just kidnapped, swallowing her whole, bones and all. That's it. Masuke can't hold himself back anymore. He charges in, dead set on ending the thing, convinced it's the same one that murdered Hatsu. But the demon senses him coming and tears into him with its claws, shredding his gut open. Then it calmly goes back to its meal, chewing through the woman's head while Masuke lies on the ground, bleeding out and wondering if this is how he's going to die, pathetic and empty, without even getting his revenge. Eventually, the demon leaves, and not long after, Jinta shows up. He spots Masuke barely hanging on and kneels beside him. Masuke manages a weak grin, joking that he really made a mess of himself. Jinta asks if he found the demon, and Masuke confirms it, saying it was here, eating women alive. It's the same monster that took his wife. Jinta is stunned to hear that, especially about the eating part. Then Masuke makes one final request. He asks Jinta to avenge him, and hands him a sword forged in Kadono, saying it'll slice through any demon like butter. Jinta promises to do just that, but in return, he asks Masuke to lend him his power. Masuke is relieved and grateful, even that he can still help Jinta one last time, even if it's with his dying breath. Jinta then absorbs Masuke's power, and as he does, he catches a glimpse into his soul. He sees that Masuke had spent most of his life running from demons, constantly looking over his shoulder. But when he finally settled in this town, he began living like a regular human, and for the first time he found peace. Eventually, he met the woman who would become his wife, and over time, they fell in love. When things got serious, he came clean about his true nature, revealing that he was actually a demon. But instead of running away, she looked him dead in the eye and told him she loved him, so human or demon, it didn't matter to her. After seeing that, Jinta finishes absorbing Masuke's power and quietly promises to carry out his final wish. Some time passes, and we see the demon dragging another woman into its hideout and starts feeding. As it eats, it starts recalling the day it first became self-aware. It had already been born into this grotesque demonic body. From the beginning, it had this instinct, this need to kill men. That urge was the only thing it understood at the time. Since then, it had been searching for something. It didn't know who or what it was looking for, just that it needed to go home. But it didn't even know where home was. The only thing it was sure of was that it couldn't return in its current state, so it kept abducting women. It believed they carried something its body lacked. That's why it devoured them, so it could consume what was missing and finally find a way back. Back in the present, the demon continues its feeding frenzy when suddenly, Jinta shows up. He's surprised the creature would come back here after its lair was exposed. Without hesitation, he attacks using invisibility, slicing off one of its hands in a clean strike. The demon lashes back, but Jinta dodges every blow, keeping just out of reach. It bolts across the temple, trying to go on the offensive, and Jinta admits that its power is kind of a pain to deal with. But this time, he is armed with Masuke's power. He dodges every strike again, then drops his invisibility, and lets the demonic aura in his arm flare. He then tells the demon that he's going to end him by using the gift Masuke entrusted him with. Jinta then charges in, vanishing at the last second, and in one clean motion, takes its head off. The demon is still clinging to life, gasping in pain, and Jinta walks up to it, demanding an answer. He asks why it left Masuke's wife's body untouched when it devoured every other woman it captured. If it really was the killer Masuke was hunting, then why didn't it consume her completely? The demon starts crying, saying it needed a body. It couldn't go home without one. Jinta doesn't understand what it's talking about, but he remembers the question the demon asked him earlier if he feasts too. He tells it yes, he does. Except he feeds on demons, the same way it fed on women. Now, he's going to consume its power. As he absorbs the demon's strength, he realizes its ability is called Dart, a temporary speed burst that lets the user kick through the air and accelerate instantly. It's a solid ability, one he's sure will come in handy. But as he consumes the demon, he ends up seeing into its soul. He sees Hatsu, Masuke's wife, being violated by two men while they're laughing, before tossing her into the river like trash. As she sinks, her final thoughts are about going home. But she refuses to return in a body that's been defiled. Instead, she searches for another vessel, one that can help her make it back to her husband. That's when she spots a nearby demon. And now it becomes clear to Jinta that this demon was Hatsu, and she just wanted to go home. But that was never going to happen. The demon then fades away, and Jinta quietly leaves the temple. A few days later, back at the soba shop, the owner mentions that Jinta hasn't shown up in a while. He figures it's because he joked about letting him marry his daughter. She reminds her father that he never actually said that, and she also ran into Jinta the other day in Asakusa, and they chatted for a bit. He told her he'd stop by once he was finished with his current job. The owner thinks that the job might already be done because word around town is that the slasher disappeared, and the killings have stopped. But she tells him Jinta mentioned he's still got demons to hunt. Somewhere else, those same two men who violated Hatsu are wandering the streets late at night. They start talking about finding their next victim, laughing about how the last one cried out for her husband as they dragged her under. But then they see Jinta. He steps forward without a word and cuts both of them down in a single strike. Looking down at their bodies, he says nothing, just hopes that Masuke can finally rest in peace, now that Hatsu's been avenged. Then he walks away. We then see a young girl softly singing a chilling melody, her voice wrapping the air in an unsettling, ghostly vibe, and she falls silent the moment the last note fades. Right after, the focus shifts to a samurai making his way toward Ofu's soba shop, and just as he reaches the entrance, he witnesses someone confusing him for someone he's looking for. As he tries to approach that person, he accidentally crashes into Natsu, who immediately panics upon realizing she just collided with a samurai, apologizing profusely. He doesn't take it personally though, and he apologizes as well, admitting that he should have been paying more attention. The owner of the shop then steps in to reassure Natsu, telling her not to worry, because this man is Naotsugu Miura. He may be a samurai, but he's well known around here for being gentle and kind-hearted. The next morning, we find Naotsugu sitting in the shop again, quietly staring at his soba. But the owner notices that he looks troubled. Curious, the owner asks him what's on his mind, and Naotsugu admits that something has been bothering him. The owner offers to hear him up, and Naotsugu confides that it's about his older brother. The owner is shocked to hear this, since as far as he knows, Naotsugu is the heir to the Miura family, so there shouldn't even be an older brother. But Naotsugu is completely sure he once had an older brother and asks Ofu if she's ever heard of him. revealing that his name was Sadanaga Miura. Afu says she hasn't, and Naotsugu expected as much. Since nobody seems to remember his brother, not even his own damn family, he started questioning his own sanity, but the owner tries to lighten the mood. Afu then chimes in, saying she knows someone who might be able to help, and her father adds that the guy's a regular customer too, and he has a habit of poking his nose into all kinds of strange cases. Naotsugu wonders aloud if the man might be some kind of diviner or shaman, which makes Afu and her father burst out laughing. They explain that he's nothing that fancy, just a ronin who for some reason goes around solving bizarre incidents for a price. The owner adds that although he can come across as intimidating, he's actually very kind, with some funny quirks. He drops by the shop every single day just to scarf down their soba. And right on cue, Jinya steps into the shop. Jinya places his order as usual, and as he eats, the owner jokes that he must really love their soba if he keeps coming back every day. But Jinya casually replies that it's nothing special, he's just grown attached to the taste. Afu then comes over to pour Jinya a refill of tea, and he notices that she's gotten a lot better at waitressing. She's happy to hear the compliment, and asks him what progress he's made recently. Jinya tells her all about the different flowers he's been learning about lately. He admits that plants are surprisingly fascinating, and now he can't help but notice all the flowers blooming by the roadside. Hearing that, she smiles and tells him that since they've already covered all the seasonal plants, it's time for her to start teaching him about mythological flowers next. Just then, Naotsugu interrupts their conversation. Naotsugu says that he heard Jinya is someone who deals with rumors of demons and other weird phenomena. Jinya confirms that's true, and Naotsugu asks if he could possibly help him solve a mystery. But Jinya refuses, saying that his specialty is limited to demon slaying, and unless demons are involved, he's not going to be much help. Naotsugu seems to understand but leaves looking pretty disappointed. After he's gone, the owner asks Jinya if he could reconsider and lend Naotsugu a hand. He explains that Naotsugu is looking for his missing big brother, and he's been worried sick about it. Afu chimes in too, urging Jinya to help, and after a moment, Jinya agrees since he does owe them both a favor. He's still curious though why they care so much, and the owner just laughs and says it's because Naotsugu is one of their rare regulars. The scene then shifts to Jinya running into Natsu at a little tea stall, and she's surprised to bump into him there. She orders some tea and a matcha while he sits down nearby. While waiting for her food, she asks him if he likes matcha, and he says he does. Her order soon arrives, and while she's eating, Jinya casually asks her when she and Zenji are finally getting married. Natsu almost chokes on her food, stunned by the question, and demands to know where that came from. Jinya reminds her that she's 16 now, and that's usually considered marrying age. She admits that's true, but she immediately adds that she could never marry Zenji, since he's always been more like a brother to her. She explains that while her father might have some prospective husbands lined up already, he also told her she's free to choose her own path. From a practical standpoint, she figures her father would probably prefer if she married someone like a samurai or a merchant for business reasons. Curious, she then flips the question back at Jinya, asking him what he thinks about marriage. He shrugs and says that nobody would ever want to marry a weird ronin like him, who doesn't even have a stable job. Natsu agrees with a laugh, but she also says that eventually everyone has to settle down at some point. She then asks him how old he is anyway. When he answers that he's 31, she's genuinely surprised to find out he's older than Zenji. She then leans in a little closer, studying him with curiosity, and points out that he doesn't really look that old, asking if he has some secret to staying young. Jinya simply says he has no idea, brushing it off. He then stands up, saying that he has work to get back to. Natsu wonders if it's another demon hunt, and he confirms it is. She questions why he's so fixated on hunting demons, when with his sword skills, he could easily land a much more stable job. But Jinya doesn't have a real answer for her. He admits that even he isn't sure why. Still, if he had to give her a reason, he says it's simply the only path he knows how to walk. Natsu smiles, telling him that he usually comes across as so dry and detached that she sometimes wonders if he even cares about anything. But hearing him open up, even just a little, shows her that deep down, he's just a regular guy with worries like anyone else. She laughs and tells him to stop speaking to her so formally from now on. With that, she bids him goodbye, playfully warning him not to brood too much, or else he's going to end up with permanent wrinkles on his forehead. The scene then shifts over to Naotsugu's home, where he is getting ready to leave. His mom sees him off and immediately guesses that he's heading out to search for his brother again, and his silence says it all. She reminds him once more that he's the sole heir to the Miura family and insists he never had an older brother. But Naotsugu firmly replies that he remembers his brother clearly. She knows he's been wandering the slums and red light districts, chasing after shadows. She begs him to give up the foolish search and start behaving like a proper samurai, one who serves his lord with dignity. But Naotsugu remains stubborn and says that he'll fulfill his duties, but only after he finds his brother. With that, he excuses himself and walks away, even as she calls after him. As Naotsugu dashes off through the streets, he recalls a conversation he once had with his brother. His brother said that it wasn't houses or land that made people, it was people who made homes. His brother also believed in loyalty and dedication, but refused to compromise his own beliefs for the sake of duty. Then Naotsugu wonders where his brother could be now. Just then, Jinta appears beside him, asking if he's heading out to continue the search, and Naotsugu is caught off guard but relieved to see him. Jinta tells him that he's decided to take a closer look into his situation, although he warns that he can't guarantee they'll find any answers. Naotsugu says that's perfectly fine, he's just glad someone believes him. Jinta then immediately gets to the point, asking Naotsugu about the events leading up to his brother's disappearance, but they decide to take the conversation somewhere more private before going into the details. The scene then shifts to the two of them seated at the soba shop, and Naotsugu can't help but take notice of the katana hanging at Jinta's side. It's clearly no ordinary blade, its craftsmanship is far too refined. Curious, Naotsugu remarks on how odd it is for a Ronin to carry such a high-quality weapon, and wonders aloud whether Jinta might have come from a samurai lineage. Jinta shakes his head, explaining that he didn't. He recounts how he once stayed in a remote mountain village known for its forge bellows, home to blacksmiths who specialized in crafting katanas. While there, he served in a role that required him to wield one, and now he serves a similar purpose once more. The blade he carries was authorized by the shogunate, so he has official permission to keep it at his side. Naotsugu hazards a guess, asking if Jinta might be from Kadono. Jinta raises an eyebrow, impressed by the accuracy. Naotsugu grins, explaining that he suspected it when he saw the design of the scabbard. He admits he's something of a katana enthusiast, and he's read that one hallmark of Kadono blades is their scabbards, unassuming in design but elegant in their subtle craftsmanship. Jinta confirms that this particular blade was once a sacred artifact enshrined in the village. It ended up in his hands due to circumstances he'd rather not get into. Naotsugu leans in, intrigued, and asks for the blade's name. Jinta answers that it's called Yarai, and Naotsugu lights up at the mention of it, speculating that the name might derive from an old phrase tied to warding off evil or purifying spirits, and he asks Jinta if he knows any stories like that. Jinta admits he doesn't, but recalls the village elder once saying the sword had remained spotless for over 100 years. Naotsugu is thrilled to hear it, and practically brimming with excitement, asks if Jinta would be willing to draw the sword and show it to him. Jinta politely declines, and Naotsugu quickly backs off, apologizing for getting carried away. With that aside, Jinta says it's time they get to the heart of the matter. Naotsugu then shares his story, how his older brother suddenly vanished without a trace, and no matter how far he searches, he finds nothing. What's worse is that nobody seems to remember his brother ever existing, not even their own parents. Everyone insists that Naotsugu is the Miura family's sole heir. A few people admit the name Sadanaga rings a faint bell, but even they eventually insist there must be a mistake. Naotsugu has no choice but to accept that he's the only person who still recalls his brother's existence. The shop owner, overhearing the heavy subject, gently cuts in, suggesting that if they're going to discuss something so serious, they might want to move somewhere more private. But Jinta shakes his head and jokingly says that it's fine because this place doesn't get much traffic. But then he adds that it was because Afu and her father both seemed genuinely worried about Naotsugu, and that's why they came to talk here. Jinta then asks Naotsugu when exactly his brother vanished, and Naotsugu replies that it was near the end of January. He remembers that right before his disappearance, his brother mentioned going to meet a girl. Not long after, Naotsugu found some flowers in his brother's room. He couldn't identify what kind they were, but they had a strong, lingering scent. The flowers were small, with delicate white petals and a bright yellow center, and it struck him as odd because his brother was never someone who cared for flowers. Since no one else had been in the room besides him, Naotsugu figured his brother must have left them there himself. Jinya considers this and asks if he still has the flowers. Naotsugu nods, saying that he kept them preserved, thinking they might serve as evidence if anything ever came to light. Hearing that, Jinya asks if he can visit Naotsugu's house tomorrow to take a look himself. Naotsugu hesitates for a moment, then agrees. The scene then shifts to Jinya arriving at the soba shop again the next day, and he notices that Natsu is already there. He places an order for soba, and the owner seems amused that Jinya has started calling Natsu so casually. He teases Afu, saying she might need to step up her game, and she quickly tells her father to stop talking nonsense. Afu comments that the two seem to be getting along, and Natsu casually replies that it's nothing special. Jinya then asks Afu how well she knows Naotsugu, and she says they aren't particularly close, but they talk now and then when he visits the shop. She's curious why Jinya's asking, and he simply replies that he was just wondering. Afu says Naotsugu has always been respectful in their conversations and comes across as a genuinely kind and sincere man. Natsu realizes they're talking about the samurai she bumped into the other day, and she agrees because she found him to be humble and polite too. The owner chimes in, saying Naotsugu seems nice and all, but he becomes overly enthusiastic whenever swords are brought up. That reminds him, so he grabs something to show everyone, and it's a kagai. He explains that Naotsugu's family serves as vassals to the shogun, so it's expected for them to possess tools like this. But Naotsugu once gave him this particular kagai, which is traditionally carried by samurai. The owner adds that Naotsugu is completely obsessed with swords. It's practically the motivation behind everything he does. He even recalls overhearing Naotsugu's mother scolding him for this obsession, and Jinya asks if he's had any dealings with her. The owner says no, he's only ever caught a glimpse of her, but based on what he's heard, she's quite the fearsome woman. The owner then tries to hand the kagai over to Jinya, who's reluctant to accept it at first, since Naotsugu gave it as a gift. But the owner insists he has no use for it, and eventually Jinya agrees to take it, deciding he'll hold on to it for now. He then turns to Afu and asks if the flowers Naotsugu mentioned the other night were daffodils, and she confirms they were. But Jinya finds that hard to believe, since Naotsugu described them as being small. Still, he really hopes they're anything but daffodils. We then cut to the same young girl from before, and she reflects quietly to herself that the place she's in now used to be her garden of joy, where she spent her childhood, but now she knows she can never return there. Then we see Jinya arriving at Naotsugu's residence, where his mom immediately notices the unexpected visitor. She eyes him carefully and asks who he might be, prompting Jinya to offer a respectful introduction. She greets him in return, her tone both kind and inquisitive, before turning to her son for more context. Jinya explains that he's from Kadono, the village famous for its master blacksmiths. Naotsugu adds that Jinya is a samurai he met not long ago, someone who shares his deep passion for swords, and he invited Jinya over for a drink. Then the two step inside. Before they get far, Naotsugu's mother thanks Jinya, which catches him off guard. He asks what for, and she tells him her son has been going through a rough patch lately, but today he seems lighter and happier, so seeing that as his mother makes her grateful, and that makes Jinya quietly touched by her words. Next, we find them seated in a quiet room, and Jinya notes how kind Naotsugu's mother seems. Naotsugu shrugs it off, calling her a bit much, then changes the subject by showing him the flowers left behind in his brother's room. Jinya leans closer to inspect them and confirms that they're definitely daffodils. Naotsugu asks if there's anything special about them, and Jinya replies that they're not particularly rare, but they're smaller than normal. He then asks Naotsugu if he's absolutely sure he found these blooming during spring. Naotsugu nods without hesitation, and Jinya's expression darkens. He tells him the girl that Sadanaga met might not have been human. Sadanaga could have been pulled into another dimension, and these flowers are proof of that. Naotsugu realizes that these flowers could be from the demon's domain, and Jinya asks to see his brother's room firsthand. Naotsugu agrees and turns to lead the way, but Jinya stays still, telling him to go ahead. Naotsugu pauses, unsure how Jinya will follow, but Jinya simply replies that he'll manage, and with that Naotsugu leaves. Alone now, Jinya thinks to himself that if the enemy can sense his presence, they might not appear at all, so he activates his stealth skill and fades from sight, trailing behind without a sound. As soon as Naotsugu opens the door to the room, a faint scent of daffodils fills the air, and he suddenly grows dizzy. Then the vision begins and he sees a young girl staring at a city engulfed in flames. She races to find her parents, but they're already trapped in the inferno, burning before her eyes, and all she can do is watch helplessly. After what feels like forever, the flames finally die down, and the girl stirs, stunned that she's still alive. As she rises, she sees that half the town has been reduced to ash. She wanders aimlessly through the ruins, eyes blank, spirit broken. The people she passes look at her in horror, and they scramble to get away. Confused, she catches a glimpse of her reflection and recoils because her face has turned into a demon. Then a realization hits her hard. Her parents are gone, her home destroyed, and every piece of her past ripped out from the roots. Worst of all, she no longer recognizes herself. So there's no way she can ever return to the peaceful life she once had. With no one to turn to, she masked her identity and faded from society, surviving in secret as the years crept by. Eventually, she found her way back to the ruins of her old home, only to see it rebuilt, now occupied by strangers, so something in her cracked. She longed more than anything to return to the life she'd lost, and that desperate longing awakened a strange power inside her, one that let her forge a new dimension. A dreamlike world where she could relive her memories again and again. Back in the present, Naotsugu jolts awake inside that illusion, and Jinta informs him that they've stumbled into the dimensional echo tied to his brother's room. Naotsugu looks around, confused by the strange world they're standing in, and Jinta asks if he saw the girl and her burning house just now. Naotsugu says he did, right before spotting a familiar figure. It's his brother, Sadanaga, laughing, smiling, playing with the girl from his vision. But something feels off because these aren't real events. They're frozen echoes, a memory looping on repeat. And then, the scene shifts. Sadanaga now turns to the girl and asks what she'd like him to make today. She tells him he should stop coming back and just go home to his family. But instead, he insists on making his favorite soba for her. She pleads with him to leave because she can't go on like this. This garden, this world, it's all she has. And it's the only place where she can still see her parents. But Sadanaga gently tells her she's wrong. Homes don't shape people, people shape homes. If a place only brings pain, then it was never a real home to begin with. She asks him how he could possibly know that. And he tells her she already understands. Deep down, after all, she's been stuck here for over a century. And he says he can leave this place, but only if she chooses to come with him. Tears in her eyes, she says it's not possible. This dream world is all she has left because it's the only space where she still feels like she belongs. So Sadanaga smiles and says that if it's how it is, then he'll stay right here with her. And gently tells her that if she wants, she can think of him as her father, and they could live together in peace. But she shakes her head and says that she could never see him that way. Sadanaga simply smiles and says that's okay, and he'll wait until the day she changes her mind. He's not joking about this. He tells her that if the day ever comes when she accepts him as family, then she has to promise they'll leave this place together. She's convinced that day will never come, and he figures that means he'll be stuck here with her for good. A moment later, Sadanaga fades from sight, and Naotsugu looks around frantically, asking the girl where his brother went, and she answers quietly that there's no one else here now. Naotsugu pleads, wanting his brother back, but Jinta steps forward and says that's not possible anymore. Naotsugu doesn't understand because Sadanaga was just here with them. Jinta casually brings up that he's been here before, prompting Naotsugu to ask what he means. Jinta explains that certain flowers only bloom in certain seasons, and the tiny daffodils Naotsugu pointed out earlier are usually a winter bloom. But back when Sadanaga vanished, he saw those exact same flowers blooming in the middle of spring, the same season Sadanaga vanished. He explains that this dimension exists beyond the bounds of their own world, and while he once suspected that daffodils were always blooming in this place, it's actually winter daphnes blooming now. These flowers signal the start of spring, but in their world, it's currently autumn. That's when he points out that time flows faster in this realm. The girl then reveals that she holds the power of the dreamer. It lets her recreate a garden filled with fragments of joy from her past. A small, self-contained world that replays her memories. But that's all it can do. Her ability is nothing more than a stroll down memory lane, and right now, she's alone in it. Naotsugu refuses to accept that, and he clings to hope. But she apologizes to him for taking Sadanaga away. She says her own brother Hyoma once saved her, and now it's time to repay that gift. She turns to leave, explaining that once she's gone, they'll return to where they came from. Jinta asks where she'll go now, and she says she's done wasting her life trapped in old memories. Hyoma gave her something real, a world built just for her, and now she'll finally go there. Jinya realizes she's honoring the promise she made to Sadanaga. Moments later, both he and Naotsugu awaken in the real world. Naotsugu still doesn't understand why his brother stayed behind, and Jinya says nothing. He just stands there, staring into the horizon. The scene then shifts to Naotsugu and Jinya sitting together in the soba shop. Naotsugu shares that he did a little digging and found out that the Great Fire of Mariki happened over 2 centuries ago. It must have been the same fire that destroyed everything the girl held dear. According to his research, the land his house stands on now was likely where the girl's home once was. That clicks with Jinya, who realizes it's why the miniature world she recreated ended up being linked to his home. He quietly apologizes, feeling like he didn't do much to help. But Naotsugu says it's alright. He's just relieved to know the kind of man his brother really was, someone who stood by his beliefs no matter what. He doesn't fully understand why Sadanaga chose to walk away from his own family, but at least now he knows his brother stayed true to his heart until the very end. He stands to leave, mentioning that he's running late. But before he heads out, Alfu gently tells him that his brother was a wonderful man, and even if the world forgets his name, it doesn't erase the fact that he risked everything to save a girl who had no one else. Naotsugu tears up hearing that and walks away quietly. Once he's gone, Alfu turns to Jinya and thanks him for helping Naotsugu get closure. But Jinya isn't at ease because there are still some details that don't sit right with him. He brings up how the demon girl kept calling Sadanaga Hyoma, but he's never heard that name before. The shop owner suggests that might have been Sadanaga's true name, and Jinya notes that usually, only a samurai's lord would know such a thing. The shopkeeper explains that it's not entirely unheard of for family members to know, but the fact that the girl referred to him as Hyoma likely means he saw her as family. That sparks another memory for Jinya, a time he mentioned how Naotsugu was always getting scolded by his mother for being obsessed with swords. He realizes now that back then, he'd accidentally used Naotsugu's real name Aramori. The owner casually says he must have heard it from his mother once. But Jinya isn't buying it because that woman was way too proper to just let something like that slip. Even when speaking to a lowly ronin like him, she showed respect and chose her words carefully. She always referred to her son as Naotsugu in front of others. So where exactly did the owner really hear the name Aramori? Because only a person's lord or family should know that. And something else is off. The demon girl never said Sadanaga had died, just that he wasn't here anymore. That thought leads Jinya to a new theory. Sadanaga might still be alive. He could have lived with the girl for nearly 2 decades before deciding to move on. But by then, he'd aged too much to return to his old life. So instead, he slipped into the city, found a cheap old house, and quietly started over, running his own soba shop. Jinya asks if he's incorrect, but the shop owner still won't budge. He insists that Sadanaga may have simply passed away from old age while still trapped in the other dimension. But Jinya isn't convinced. He recalls the girl's expression, and it wasn't the look of someone who had lost someone. She was smiling, and that smile told him she'd found a new father. Once again, Jinya calls him out, stating plainly that the shopkeeper is Sadanaga. After a moment, the owner quietly admits that Jinya is right. He wonders how long Jinya's known, and Jinya replies that he figured it out the moment everything came together. There had been hints scattered throughout, and one of the biggest was the kagai he carried. Jinya always thought it odd for a simple soba shop owner to have something like that. The owner smiles and explains it was actually a gift from Naotsugu, who got annoyed watching him scratch his itchy scalp in public and wanted him to look more proper. Jinya asks why he doesn't just tell Naotsugu the truth, that he's alive. Surely it would make him happy. But the owner says he's already made his choice, and he chose the girl. And after that, he could no longer consider himself a part of the Miura family. He gave up the right to call himself Naotsugu's brother. Besides, Naotsugu's grown now, he can stand on his own. He offers Jinya the kagai as a gift and asks if he understands why he chose to become that little girl's father. Jinya simply says there was no grand reason, and the owner agrees. He says it was just that simple. He couldn't stand watching the girl suffer alone. So he stayed, and that was it. A man makes his choices and sticks with them. Trying to explain it further wouldn't change how others see it. Everyone has their own way of thinking. Jinya nods, understanding perfectly. The owner knew he would. After all, Jinya's lived long enough to gain some wisdom. And he also knows that Jinya is a demon. that catches Jinta off guard, but the owner explains that after living alongside a demon for more than 20 years, you start to recognize the signs. Curious, Jinta asks how the girl is doing these days. The owner looks over and says, "She's right here." At that moment, Alfu reveals her demon eyes, and Jinta realizes it. She's the little girl from the other world. That's why he was able to enter her memory realm so easily, because it was connected to her. Alfu meets his eyes and asks if he's going to kill her now that he knows she's a demon. But Jinta just sighs, brushes past it, and calmly orders a bowl of soba. She lights up with a quiet smile, glad to see that there's more to him than duty alone. And then she walks over to serve him his meal. We are still in the year 1853, and Jinta is seen relaxing over tea and a few sweets with his dad. Mid-conversation, his father brings up a small request. He tells Jinta that a picture book seller from Tenmacho reached out to him not long ago, claiming to have found something out of the ordinary. He then pulls out a mysterious print called the Ukiyo-e of Kudanzaka to show it to Jinta, and he calls it a demon. Jinta asks if there are any strange stories tied to the artwork, and his father explains that the artist who made the piece fell seriously ill and hasn't recovered. Some people are saying the illness hit him because he sold a drawing of a demon. Then he asks Jinta for his thoughts. At first glance, Jinta says it looks normal, but he adds that things tied to the supernatural usually only reveal themselves under specific circumstances. His father agrees and says that if the print turns out to cause harm, he hopes Jinta will handle it. Jinta nods, and his father reassures him that he's not asking for a free favor. He says once it's all taken care of, they should grab a drink together, and Jinta is fine with that. The next day, we see Jinta stopping by the soba shop and ordering a bowl. Zenji walks in and pulls out a version of the Ukiyo-e of Kudanzaka, telling him that it's supposed to be a cursed print. He says the previous owner died under mysterious circumstances, supposedly because of some kind of hex. Jinta immediately notices that the print is torn, and Zenji admits he accidentally ripped it on the way over. The owner scolds him for dragging a cursed, ripped print into his shop. Zenji apologizes, and Jinta pulls out his own copy of the picture and says it came from a picture book dealer in Tenmacho. But when they compare both versions, Zenji sees they're exactly the same. Jinta doesn't like the idea that more than one cursed print with no clear origin is floating around. Alfu then looks over the print and says it looks like nothing more than a beautiful artwork at first glance, and she asks Zenji if he notices anything strange about it. He points out that there's no fading or damage, and the colors still look fresh, probably printed within the last year. Zenji then says he knows the shop in Tenmacho and could easily find out who the artist is, so Jinta says that he'd appreciate the help. But Zenji says not to mention it after all. He's done a lot for Natsu. Later, Zenji heads off alone to speak with the picture book seller, while Jinta waits nearby, hidden in the shadows. The shopkeeper greets him, joking if he's here to browse the newest selection of erotic prints, but Zenji brushes it off and says they can talk about that another time. Right now, he wants to ask about the Ukiyo-e of Kudanzaka. The shopkeeper admits that he's no longer displaying that one because it's been labeled a demon picture, and he's not willing to take that kind of risk. Zenji assumes it's just a rumor the artist started, but the owner says the artist actually fell sick and hasn't recovered. And there's even talk that someone who bought the picture died under mysterious circumstances. He doesn't want to damage his shop's reputation, so he's keeping it tucked away. Zenji finds the whole thing suspicious and wonders whether the artist lives nearby. Soon after Zenji returns, and Jinta immediately notices the print in his hand. Zenji quickly hides it and tells him he found out the artist lives in Sakecho. Jinta nods and heads off, and we cut to him arriving at the artist's residence. After asking for permission, he enters, and the artist, Saga Doshu, welcomes him, saying he hasn't had a visitor in quite some time. Saga asks who he is, and Jinta introduces himself politely. He explains that he came to speak with him about a particular matter, but Saga tells him to relax because he's not anyone of importance. Jinta takes a seat and notices the room is scattered with paintings. He mentions he's heard that Saga has been bedridden, but Saga gently corrects him, saying it's not sickness, it's just that he's no longer as resilient as he once was. His body can't handle painting the way it used to, and Jinta realizes that the demon painting isn't responsible for his condition. Saga asks if Singendo sent him, but Jinta says no, he just came to inquire about the demon print he created. Saga is clearly flooded with memories at the mention of the picture, so Jinta explains that he's investigating its origin and wants to know the truth behind it. Saga understands and starts by explaining the name. He says Kudanzaka doesn't refer to a road in Edo, but to the woman depicted in the artwork. Jinta wonders if that's the woman's name, but Saga says it's not exactly that. Long ago, a man wielding a Kadono-style blade gave the piece that name. The man's name was Madoharu, and he often visited this place. At that, Jinta realizes he's talking about his foster father, and he recalls his final moments with him. During his final moments, he felt powerless, unable to even protect the one woman he truly cared for, and felt useless. He admitted to Jinta that at first, he wasn't fond of Yokazi. Still, being chosen as the guardian of a shrine maiden wasn't the worst fate. Even though he could never quite understand her, little by little, he found himself wanting to shield the very person who once made his life harder. He believed he could do it, but everything eventually changes. He looked Jinta in the eye and told him not to end up like him, not to become a man who lets bitterness define who he is. And then, without hesitation, he walked into battle and never came back. Now in the present, Jinta asks Saga to tell him more about Madoharu, revealing that Madoharu had raised him as his foster father. Saga agrees, saying there's no way to discuss the origin of the Kudanzaka artwork without bringing up Madoharu. He begins his story, saying it all began when he was still just a beginner artist struggling to find his place. He had managed to rent a small place in Edo, and during his time there, he caught sight of a woman around the neighborhood. Curious, he asked her name, and she replied that she couldn't tell him, not because she was hiding something, but because she physically couldn't lie. So she simply asked him to refer to her as Nameless. Over time, they got to know each other better, and she would sometimes stop by to look at his work. He once told her that he was going to become Edo's most renowned artist, and she laughed, thinking he was just messing around. Then one day, Madoharu arrived to deliver a message from the Itsukihime. He complained the whole time about how ridiculous it was for a guardian like him to be sent out running errands. Saga teased him, asking why he always had something negative to say about the shrine maiden. Madoharu explained that he took the role believing it was something honorable, but instead, she had him running letters like a delivery boy. He even joked that she was worse than any demon he'd ever heard of. According to Saga, Madoharu would visit Edo every year, and without fail, he'd be full of complaints about the Itsukihime. This catches Jinta off guard because apparently, Madoharu had only ever shown him his serious noble side. Saga continues and shifts back to the picture itself, explaining that he made the artwork back when Nameless was still living nearby. Later on, Shinjendo came along and wanted to publish it, so Saga redrew a master copy for woodblock reproduction, and that's how the printed version started circulating. Jinta wonders aloud if the image was based on Nameless herself, but Saga tells him it's not quite that simple. Then Jinta asks the real question, why he called Kudanzaka a demon picture. So Saga quietly replies that it's because it is one, the painting is real, and it carries an actual curse. But before Saga begins telling the full story, he turns to Jinta and asks what thoughts crossed his mind when he first laid eyes on the artwork. Jinta replies that it reminded him of the legend of Princess Nunakawa from Shinano, but the sword in her hand made him suspect it might be linked to Kadono and the Itsukihime. Saga nods, saying that's a sharp observation, then warns that the truth behind the painting might be something Jinta will wish he hadn't heard. He begins explaining, telling him that Madoharu had come to Edo year after year on business, often stopping by to vent and then heading home. But at some point, his attitude toward the shrine maiden started to shift, and one day, out of nowhere, he asked Saga to draw a portrait of her. Saga teased him about it, but Madoharu admitted that he no longer resented her because he had come to understand that she had her reasons for the things she did. Saga agreed to take on the request, but there was one problem. He had never actually seen the Itsukihime in person. Madoharu brushed it off and said it wouldn't be an issue because Nameless could serve as the model. He told Saga that Nameless originally came from Shinano, but something tragic happened to her there, and afterward, she ended up living in Kadono, and eventually she made her way to Edo. Saga found the story interesting, but wasn't sure how any of that would help him draw the shrine maiden. So Madoharu told him that Nameless and Yokazi were far more alike than anyone realized, and visually, they were practically indistinguishable. Jinta realizes then that the figure in the Kudanzaka painting must be modeled after Yokazi. Saga confirms that he's right, saying that the final portrait was drawn based on Nameless with Madoharu's input guiding the finer details. When Jinta asks about the whole demon picture story, Saga explains that it was all a running joke. Madoharu used to say the Itsukihime was more demonic than any real monster. And so Saga dubbed the portrait a demon picture as a jab at those complaints. It was meant as a joke between them, but years later, when he redrew the image for Shinjendo out of nostalgia, he made the same joke again, and they took it seriously. They thought it really was cursed, especially after someone who bought it fell ill. A string of coincidences blew the whole thing out of proportion, and suddenly, people were calling it a cursed image. Jinta then asks what Saga meant earlier when he said he might regret learning the truth, and Saga responds by asking if Jinta sees Kudanzaka as a beautiful piece. He explains that no matter how many times he revised the picture, Madoharu was never satisfied. He kept pushing for more elegance, more grace, always wanting it to reflect a kind of beauty that went beyond reality. Saga reveals that Kudanzaka is really the Itsukihime through Madoharu's lens. It's her form, her presence, taken and polished to divine levels of beauty. He tells Jinta that while today the image might remind him of Princess Nonakawa, back then, Madoharu compared it to Yasakadam no Kami, the sacred deity. And Jinta recalls Madoharu teaching him a bit about that deity when he was young, and she was a revered figure from Suwa and Shinano. Saga guesses Madoharu might have said those things because Nameless came from Shinano. But both he and his father compared the painting to the divine women of Shinano. And Saga reveals that Madoharu gave it the name Kudanzaka because he believed it was even more breathtaking than Yasakadam no Kami herself. He explains that the painting is essentially a reflection of Madoharu's intense love, something so heavy and passionate, it felt like a curse. Jinta realizes that Kudanzaka wasn't born from hatred or anger, but from a feeling far deeper than that. Saga's a bit surprised that Jinta had no idea about the truth behind the painting, and he decides to give him one of the older illustrations he sketched back when it all started. He hopes that Jinta won't think less of his father after everything he said, because while Madoharu might have been a stubborn man, he truly did care about his family. Once his daughter was born, he started visiting Ito less and less, and after he told Saga that he'd become a foster father to 2 kids, he stopped coming altogether. That's just the kind of man he was, and Jinta already knows it. Later, Jinta is sitting in the soba shop, quietly eating a bowl, and he tells the owner that he really was a good dad. Afu asks if something's bothering him and wonders if it's got anything to do with the Kudanzaka painting. Jinta tells her it's nothing like that. He just happened to learn something new about the man who raised him. Afu tells him that sounds normal, because nobody's perfect. Her own dad's got flaws too, but she loves him all the more because of them, and Jinta agrees with her. Jinta then meets up with his real father later, and lets him know that the painting isn't dangerous and the demon part was really just the artist's own regrets bleeding into the canvas. So Jinta doesn't see any harm in keeping it or selling it off. His father then brings up the person who supposedly died because of it, but Jinta says that was probably just a freak coincidence. He also mentions that he took possession of the print that person had on them, and it didn't seem cursed at all. His father nods, thanks him for the work, and tells him he'll hand over the payment once he's ready to head out. But for now, they should just sit and have a drink. They start drinking together, and Jinta asks if his dad always drinks like this. His father says he used to drink as a way to avoid dealing with real life, and over time, it simply turned into a habit. Then he turns the question back to Jinta. Jinta says he enjoys drinking, especially under the moonlight every now and then. His father says they should drink together again, sometime if the chance comes up, and Jinta agrees. Then the story moves forward into the year 1854, where we see a zombie woman approaching Jinta on a quiet street. She was once part of the pleasure district, and with a desperate look in her eyes, she begs him to stay with her for the night. Jinta, of course, calmly turns that shit down, but she presses him again, saying she's in pain. But still he refuses her request without a damn hesitation. But suddenly, she completely shifts into a full demon form and lunges at him. But he evades her attack and continues avoiding her follow-up strikes. He asks for her identity, but she is beyond responding, and he ultimately kills her as she lunges forward once more. His client who requested his services then appears on the scene, convinced that his renown as a demon slayer is genuine. She hands over his reward, explaining that the woman he eliminated was once a former courtesan from Yoshiwara who had been imprisoned in a brothel and forced to work there. She was afflicted with a deadly sickness and was abandoned after being physically and emotionally destroyed, eventually transforming into a monster and beginning to murder men beneath the cherry trees. The client considers her fate incredibly tragic, prompting him to question whether pity motivated her to employ his services. The client replies she engaged him only because she herself is similar to that woman, and she may easily suffer the same fate someday. Knowing this, she couldn't simply ignore her, and she thanks him and says sorry for dumping something like this on him. Jinta questions why she would consider this burdensome, and she responds it's her profession to interpret a man's feelings from his expression, and he currently has the look of a confused little boy. He asks exactly who she is, and she replies that he should just call her harlot, because that's precisely what she is. She hopes he'll eliminate her should she ever transform into a twisted spirit from the red light district as well. Though she acknowledges she won't have money to offer him, he informs her that he never works without payment, prompting her to remark on his coldness as she walks away. The scene then shifts to Ofu and Natsu attending a festival by themselves, and Natsu is irritated that none of the boys they invited decided to show up. Ofu understands Jinta and Naotsugu were occupied, but feels disappointed that Zenji didn't show either, especially since he initiated the invitation. Natsu reveals Zenji genuinely wanted to attend, but her father intervened, reminding him that holidays are prime opportunities for merchants to profit. Natsu then suggests they simply enjoy the festival by themselves, and Ofu happily agrees. They then stroll through the stalls, grab some snacks, and stop by a lantern plant vendor. Natsu questions why they're known as lantern plants, and Ofu tells her it's partly due to their vivid color, but others suggest it's because they resemble tiny flames. There are several theories, but nobody knows for sure how the name originated, and Ofu mentions their name can also be written using the kanji for demon and light. Because they're shaped like lanterns, some theorize that demons ignite them to see at night, and Natsu asks her to stop before she ruins their charm completely. Ofu inquires if Natsu dislikes demons, and Natsu confirms she does, noting it's hard to find anyone who doesn't. She reveals she has been attacked twice by demons already, and would have died if Jinta hadn't intervened. Natsu explains she first encountered Jinta 4 years ago, when he served as her bodyguard for just 2 nights. When she saw him slice a demon's arm off, she had the naive idea that he was a legendary swordsman straight out of a fairy tale, and Ofu comments that Natsu clearly has strong feelings for Jinta. Natsu insists that's not what she meant, clarifying she simply sees him as a figure from a children's story. However, she recalls the moment when Jinta admitted even he doesn't know why he hunts demons, noting it made him seem less like a master swordsman and more like another fragile person. She recognized he wasn't so different from herself, which put her at ease. Natsu adds it's unfair to call these romantic feelings since that would be disrespectful to women everywhere, and Ofu agrees, mentioning she's also noticed Jinta's bad habit of ignoring his true emotions. At that moment, a man named Akitsu calls out to them from his stand, and Ofu recognizes him, prompting Natsu to ask who he is. Ofu explains he's been a regular customer at her shop since last year, always ordering deliveries. He's originally from Kyoto, and the man introduces himself as Samgoro Akitsu. Natsu is skeptical that he really is Samgoro Akitsu, one of the most renowned metalsmiths of their era. He urges her not to fixate on the name, but Natsu can't simply ignore it, emphasizing that as a merchant's daughter, names carry significant weight. She asks whether the goods he's selling truly live up to the Samgoro reputation and carefully examines his wares, conceding their decent quality. Akitsu jokes about her tough standards and then proudly presents her with some intricately painted clam shells. Natsu observes that they're a bit old but still beautifully crafted, and he suggests that a young lady her age probably has some boy she's interested in. So if she were to give him a gift like this, he's bound to fall for her. Natsu insists she isn't interested in anyone that way, but Ofu interjects, saying she's just being bashful and does like someone, though she can't admit it openly. Natsu tells her to stop talking immediately, so the vendor instead offers her a netsuke carved as a fluffy sparrow. He reveals he crafted this himself, and she recognizes it's not exactly Samgoro level, but still decent quality. He tells her it would suit someone her age perfectly, explaining that in China, there's a legend that sparrows become clams when they dive into the ocean. That's their explanation for why sparrows disappear in late autumn, and Natsu asks how that relates to her. He explains he thought a sparrow fit her better since she's not mature enough for the clam shells yet, causing Ofu to laugh at the joke. Natsu gets irritated by this, but he clarifies he's not making fun of her and hopes her youthful feelings can mature into a clam someday. Natsu retorts that this entire conversation is nonsense, yet she decides to buy the netsuke anyway since it's rather adorable. As she pays, he hands her a genuine Samgoro hairpin as a bonus, prompting her to ask where he acquired it. He casually says he got it cheaply somewhere, and if she doesn't want it, he'll just toss it away. She quickly accepts the gift, and he asks Afu if she'd like anything, but Afu declines. He jokes about how tightly she's holding on to her money, and the two of them then move along. Later that night, Jinta is out hunting another demon in a warehouse, and he eventually locates it. Noticing it's merely a child, he asks for its name, and when it replies that it's Kikuo, he promptly slays it. Shortly afterward, he meets the warehouse owner, who thanks him for his service and gives him his payment. He offers Jinta some sake from his stock as a token of gratitude, but Jinta politely declines. As Jinta leaves, the owner remarks he'll definitely seek his help again if another incident arises, while a shady grin spreads across his face. Later on, Jinta runs into Harlat again, and she's relieved to see he made it out in one piece. She's pleased her intel was accurate this time, and he hands her a cut of his payment in thanks. She picks up on the heavy mood he's carrying and asks what's got him looking so grim. So Jinta explains that he ended up taking out someone he really didn't want to. But she reminds him that it's not like he planned on sparing the demon either. And as she turns to leave, she suddenly recalls something. There's been talk about another guy who's been hunting demons, but she's not talking about Jinta. Apparently, this guy is a spirit medium of some kind and can command Shinigami to exorcise demons for him. She's not sure if it's real or just another crazy rumor, but she says if it is true, Jinta better watch out or this new guy might start snatching all the good-paying jobs. And with that, she heads off. The following day, Jinta stops by the soba shop, and the owner and Afu are happy to see him. Afu quickly tells him that Natsu's been acting strange since yesterday. The moment she spots Jinta, Natsu rushes over, clings to him, and happily calls him her brother, saying how much she missed him. She insists she's glad to be back by his side, and Jinta is clearly caught off guard, trying to gently pull his hand free, but Natsu only tightens her grip, saying she wants to stay close. Afu then explains that this started when Natsu tried on the hairpin she bought yesterday, and right after putting it on, she suddenly went quiet, and then began sobbing about her brother. Jinta notices that the pin she's wearing is a kanzashi and calmly asks Natsu if he can take a closer look. She hands it over without question, and he examines it with Afu and the shop owner. It looks completely ordinary, nothing out of place. The owner then suggests that maybe smashing it would snap her out of it, but Jinta warns against doing anything reckless for now. He hands the pin back to Natsu, who immediately pulls him into a hug again. Just then, Naotsugu and Zenji walk into the shop and freeze at the sight of Natsu wrapped around Jinta. Zenji's eyes go wide as he asks what the hell's going on, and when he tries to pull them apart, he finds he can't budge Natsu at all. She glances at him and casually asks who he is, leaving Zenji stunned and speechless. After that, they all sit down together and break the situation down for Zenji and Naotsugu. Jinta turns to Afu and asks where they got the kanzashi from, and she tells him they picked it up during the Hazuki festival a few nights ago. It was being sold by a man named Akitsu Samgoro, who claimed to be from Kyoto. Jinta decides to begin by tracking him down, but Zenji drops a bomb, saying Samgoro has been dead for quite a while. He explains that the original Samgoro was a master metalsmith whose work dates back decades. His pieces are still famous to this day, and even their shop struggles to get their hands on one. Afu recalls that Natsu did say this kanzashi was a genuine Samgoro piece when she first saw it. Zenji wonders if this could mean Samgoro's spirit came back and possessed Natsu somehow, but the shop owner shuts that down, saying he's actually met the man recently, and he was very much human. Jinta trusts the owner's read on the situation, but Afu points out that this leaves them with barely anything to go on. Jinta figures he'll just have to find the guy directly and tries to leave, but Natsu is still clinging to him tightly. He gently asks her to let go, but she refuses and says she's finally found him again and doesn't want to be apart from him anymore. Jinta tries to make sense of it and asks why she keeps calling him her brother. She softly replies that birds don't need a reason to settle near a flower, and she simply wants to stay by his side. Her only wish was to be near him again, and now that it's come true, she doesn't want it to end. Jinta speaks to her calmly, telling her he has something to do and asks her to hold down the place until he gets back. She wants to follow him, but he pats her on the head and promises that he'll return soon. That's enough for her, so she agrees to wait, and he heads out. The others are kind of stunned by how easily he handled that, and they start wondering if maybe he's dealt with this kind of thing before. The scene then shifts to Jinta going around town, asking people about Akitsu Samgoro, but he doesn't come up with anything useful. That evening, while wandering through the streets, a thought of Suzu crosses his mind. Just then, a voice calls out from behind. Akitsu steps up to him, and Jinya immediately asks if he needs something. But Akitsu says it's the other way around. Jinya's the one who's been trying to find him. He figures he already knows why, since demons only show up at his door for one reason. Jinya is caught off guard by how casually he points that out, especially because he's somehow aware that Jinya is a demon. That's when Jinya realizes this is the man Harlot mentioned before. Jinya asks for a proper introduction, and the man responds by summoning a group of familiars and calmly introducing himself as Akitsu Samgoro III. Just then, the Inugami familiars lunge at Jinya without hesitation, but he reacts instantly, cutting down one of them in a clean strike. Akitsu, watching from nearby, notes Jinya's sharp reflexes with mild admiration, but quickly points out that such skill won't be enough to bring down an Inugami. As if on cue, the creature Jinya just felled reanimates and charges at him again, joined by the rest of its pack. Unshaken, Jinya tears through them all with relentless precision. But no matter how many he slays, they keep getting back up, and it's then that he realizes this fight has no end. Jinya promptly activates his invisibility, and Akitsu notes with interest that this must be his special ability. However, the Inugami easily track his presence despite his invisibility, forcing Jinya to cut them down repeatedly as they charge. Seeing this endless cycle continue, Jinya decides to deactivate his invisibility. Akitsu is surprised, questioning why Jinya would discard such a rare ability. But Jinya calmly replies that he'll simply resort to another since invisibility proved ineffective. Instantly dispatching the attacking Inugami, he charges toward Akitsu at blinding speed. Akitsu barely manages to block Jinya's strike, but is still hurled violently backward. Jinya quickly closes in again and lands another slash, only to discover that this was merely an illusion. Immediately, the Inugami resume their relentless assault, overwhelming Jinya in their numbers. Confident that Jinya must now be finished, Akitsu turns to leave, but Jinya halts his escape, prompting Akitsu to notice that Jinya remains completely unharmed. Akitsu demands to know how he survived untouched, and Jinya calmly explains that these Inugami are merely on par with high-level demons. Then astonishingly, Jinya summons his own Inugami, unleashing them directly against Akitsu. And he is stunned when he realizes that Jinya somehow commandeered his Inugami. And with nowhere left to run, Jinya presses him, stating they need to have a talk. He informs Akitsu he has questions, promising not to harm him if he cooperates. Akitsu cautiously asks what will happen if he refuses, and Jinya plainly answers he'll simply cut him down and forcibly extract the information from his memories. Understanding he's clearly outmatched, Akitsu reluctantly agrees to cooperate. Still, Jinya's certain that Akitsu hasn't yet revealed all his strength, just as Akitsu himself is sure that Jinya is withholding his full potential too. Akitsu agrees to answer Jinya's questions, requesting first that he's permitted to retrieve the pups, and Jinya allows him to do so. Akitsu notes that Jinya is perhaps overly trusting, and that could easily get him tricked someday. Jinya hopes aloud that he's not planning to be the one who tries, but Akitsu says relax because he's not, and tells him to wait a second while he gathers his Inugami. He then picks up the tiny dolls left behind by them, and quietly tells them he'll give them proper offerings once they're home. Jinya inquires about the small objects, and Akitsu reveals that they're known as Dog Hariko, questioning if Jinya has ever encountered the concept of Tsukimagami. He explains that they're items imbued with feelings, noting that human emotions possess a unique power. If negative emotions can manifest as demons, it's equally plausible for the emotions residing in objects to materialize. Jinya quickly understands, realizing that Akitsu can harness the emotions held within items, turning them into demonic entities. Akitsu confirms this, specifying that he can indeed produce Tsukimagamis, clarifying he's not a controller of Shinigami like an Onmyoji. Jinya remembers Akitsu previously mentioning he's the third, prompting him to ask whether Akitsu belongs to a lineage of spirit banishers. Akitsu corrects him, stating they're not exactly a family lineage. They don't rely on methods passed down within a family. Rather, Akitsu represents a particular school. The original Samgoro Akitsu was merely an exceptionally skilled craftsman whose creations became infused with souls. Gradually, he mastered shaping these souls into Tsukimagamis and eventually devised a spell to control them. When the first Samgoro withdrew into isolation, his apprentice took his name, and now Akitsu himself is the third to carry it. Akitsu emphasizes that the name Sumgoro Akitsu represents the artisan, not a family line of spirit banishers. After apologizing for digressing, he asks for Jinya's name, to which Jinya promptly introduces himself. Then Jinya remarks that Akitsu sold a kanzashi to a woman yesterday. Akitsu recalls that he didn't actually sell the kanzashi, but instead gave it away freely. Jinya explains that once the girl wore the kanzashi, her behavior drastically changed, prompting him to ask Akitsu to explain the item's background. Akitsu claims it's merely an ordinary kanzashi, but noticing something particular about Jinya, promises he'll handle the issue with the girl, provided Jinya puts his sword away. Jinya cautiously expresses hope that Akitsu isn't deceiving him, to which Akitsu reassures him that he's speaking honestly, adding that Jinya has no choice but to trust him. The scene then shifts as Jinya returns to the soba shop later that evening, spotting Natsu waiting outside for him. She's delighted upon seeing his return, prompting Jinya to ask if she'd been waiting for him all this time. Natsu confirms she was, reminding him that he'd asked her to wait. He apologizes for his tardiness, but she isn't concerned, stating confidently that she knew he'd come back eventually, and together they begin walking slowly into the night. As they're strolling along, Jinya's attention falls on a snow willow tree, prompting him to stop and describe to Natsu how its blossoms flutter gently down like snowflakes in springtime. Impressed, she remarks that he seems unusually knowledgeable about plants, once again addressing him affectionately as brother. He softly protests, confessing he doesn't particularly enjoy being called brother, as it feels as though someone has glimpsed into his weakest point. It reminds him vividly of those he couldn't protect, evoking broken promises and failures. He quietly admits he was never genuinely a big brother, not to her, nor to Susu. Natsu immediately counters this claim, asserting firmly that it's not true. She explains simply that a bird needs no reason to nestle close to a blooming flower, just as siblings require no reason to remain connected. No matter the circumstances, the bond between them remains unbreakable. She expresses genuine joy at finally being reunited after so much time apart, reassuring him confidently that he'll also find his own path back, just as she did. Uncertain, he asks if she'll really think he'll find it, and she confidently assures him he will, emphasizing that's precisely the purpose of living. Jinya gratefully thanks her for patiently listening to his worries and hands her the kagai he received from the soba shop owner, explaining gently that it represents her other half. He recalls clearly what Akitsu instructed him, to deliver the kagai to the girl, after which everything should return to normal. Natsu gladly accepts the kagai, delighted to finally touch her brother again, and softly thanks him. Moments later, the soul residing in the kanzashi transforms into a sparrow, gracefully flying out of Natsu's body. Natsu then collapses gently, and Jinya quickly catches her. Akitsu arrives, warmly praising Jinya for his skillful handling of the situation, then proceeds to clarify that if both items, the kanzashi and the kagai, were crafted by the same artisan, they're typically regarded as siblings. However, given that kanzashis are feminine and kogais masculine, they can specifically represent brother and sister. Akitsu surmises Jinya's kagai must indeed be another Sumgoro creation, explaining the kanzashi recognized him as brother precisely because he possessed her matching sibling piece. Jinya reveals that initially, he believed the kanzashi embodied the emotions of someone long departed, which would explain why Natsu, while under its influence, desperately sought her brother, leading him to mistakenly conclude he must resemble the kanzashi's original brother. Akitsu remarks lightly that those types of things only occur in fairy tales, prompting Jinya to realize that the kanzashi was simply seeking out the kagai. Reflecting quietly, Jinya marvels at how many mysterious and extraordinary things exist in this world, leading Akitsu to tease him that those hardly sound like words coming from a demon. Akitsu expresses relief that ultimately the kanzashi could reunite with her sibling, prompting Jinya to wonder aloud where its next journey might lead. Akitsu confidently replies that it'll probably venture somewhere distant, eventually settling in a place it truly feels connected to. He notes gently that they'll only discover exactly where when they someday ask the sparrow itself, and Jinya warmly hopes that it'll soon find its true home. After a pause, Akitsu announces that it's time for him to leave, prompting Jinya to question if it's really acceptable for him to just let a demon go free. Akitsu casually assures him there's no harm in it, reminding him pointedly that he previously overlooked Ofu's demonic nature, so letting another demon slide isn't exactly a huge stretch. By now, Akitsu understands clearly that Jinya poses no real threat. He's just an artisan who only hunts demons upon request. He has no desire to target peaceful demons who don't harm others, but he softly reminds both of them not to forget their true nature. They remain demons, forever destined to be the ones hunted. This reality won't ever change, regardless of how kind they act or how many people they save. Jinta quietly acknowledges this, and with relief, Akitsu bids farewell and departs. The following day, Zenji is overjoyed seeing Natsu back to her usual self, though he's puzzled why she looks so glum. Afu clarifies teasingly that Natsu vividly remembers everything from the previous day, prompting Zenji to mischievously remind her how sweetly she called Jinta brother. He gleefully suggests it must have been humiliating, provoking Natsu's fury as she threatens to kill him for bringing it up. Zenji quickly attempts to calm her down, and the shop owner offers her food as consolation. He casually wonders aloud why Jinta hasn't stopped by today, instantly causing Natsu to blush furiously upon hearing his name mentioned. Afu playfully asks her if she's finally ready to become a clam, but Natsu stubbornly insists she's perfectly happy remaining a sparrow. Still mortified, she agonizes over how she'll ever face Jinta again. Meanwhile, Jinta crosses paths with Harlot while wandering the streets. He wryly comments that it's a bit early in the day for her to start charming men, but she swiftly replies that she just came over to say hello out of genuine concern. She scolds him gently for always being so cold towards her and suggests they chat since they've bumped into each other anyway, offering him some intriguing rumors that might be valuable to him. Just then, the sound of a sparrow chirping reaches their ears, prompting Harlot to mention she's been hearing that very sound since last night. She complains that she barely got any sleep because of it, finding it odd that the bird seems to be constantly nearby. She's puzzled about what's going on, while Jinta recalls Akitsu mentioning that feelings eventually find their way back to where they truly belong. Realizing this sparrow must be the same one that flew away from Natsu yesterday evening, Jinta stands in contemplation, leaving Harlot to ask him curiously what's on his mind. The story then moves forward in time to the year 2009, where Miyaka's mother praises her daughter for how beautifully she looks in her shrine maiden attire. Miyaka is embarrassed and asks her mother why she's so insistent about her becoming a shrine maiden, worrying it would be humiliating if any of her friends came by and saw her dressed this way. Her mother explains that this role is something any girl born into their shrine must fulfill, adding that her own mother had requested her to uphold two important traditions and pass them down through future generations. The first is to incorporate the character for knight into the name of every daughter born into the family, while the second is to ensure that the shrine maiden bloodline is never broken. Miyaka wonders aloud why her grandmother would have requested something like that, but her mother confesses even she isn't entirely sure about its significance. Her mother gently continues, stating that even if they can't fully grasp the tradition's meaning, it must have been important to the person who originally established it. Therefore, protecting it isn't so much about the tradition itself, but rather about preserving the feelings behind it. That's why they must continue using the kanji for knight in their names. She then leaves Miyaka alone to prepare dinner, leaving Miyaka confused and pondering what her mother had just explained, though she keeps sweeping the shrine grounds diligently, mostly to stay warm. Just then, Jinta approaches her and inquires if she's the shrine maiden, explaining he has something he'd like to ask her. Miyaka promptly corrects him, clarifying she's not merely a shrine maiden, but rather an Itsukihime. Hearing that title astonishes Jinta deeply, and though Miyaka admits she herself isn't sure what exactly an Itsukihime is, she informs him it's a traditional title held at Jinta Shrine. The mention of Jinta Shrine shocks Jinta even more, and tears well up in his eyes as he's overcome by the realization that the chief truly managed to preserve this place so he could one day return. With heartfelt gratitude, he thanks Miyaka sincerely for sharing this with him and turns to leave. Miyaka quickly stops him, reminding him he initially came to ask something, but Jinta gently replies he's already found the answer he was seeking and departs. The scene then shifts to a school entrance ceremony where Miyaka is among the new students attending. Unexpectedly, Jinta is also present for some reason, catching Miyaka completely by surprise as she notices him there too. Next, we see Miyaka and her classmate Kaoru seated side by side, quietly watching a stage play unfold. Kaoru raises an eyebrow, still surprised that their class is actually permitted to attend a performance during school time. She looks over and sees that Miyaka looks a bit drained, and Miyaka admits she didn't sleep too well last night. Miyaka then gets curious and asks what the play is about, and Kaoru explains it's titled Streetwalker in the Rain, a drama inspired by the memoirs of a drifting woman from the Edo period, and it's a heartfelt tale about her connection with a samurai. Miyaka gets puzzled and asks what exactly a wandering woman is supposed to be. So Kaoru casually replies that it's another word for someone who worked in the pleasure quarters. She says the woman in the story was originally born to a samurai or merchant household, but things went south for her family, so she ended up taking on that kind of life. Miyaka raises an eyebrow, saying Kaoru sure knows a lot about this stuff. Kaoru just shrugs and says someone explained it to her recently. The curtain rises, and the narrator begins. It all started when a samurai showed up with a marriage offer. It was less about love and more about trying to prop up a crumbling family name, because back then, women were basically seen as bargaining chips. The samurai asked the woman her name, and she calmly said she was born into a samurai family. Her cold, indifferent tone made it sound like she was mocking him, so he backed out of the proposal, and that single decision shattered the family's last hope. Their downfall came fast. Her father passed away from grief, while her mother spent her days bitter and ranting. None of it really mattered though, because there had never been real love in their home, just a hollow connection. From that moment on, nobody ever used the woman's real name again. Not that she cared, because deep down, she had seen this ending coming for a long time. Then one rainy night, Naotsugu ducked under a house awning to get out of the storm. Not long after, Harlat showed up and joined him under the same shelter. She asked him if he was just trying to stay dry too, and the moment he saw her, he was stunned. She casually wiped the rain off her arms, and he couldn't stop staring. She noticed and asked him if seeing someone from the red light district was really such a rare thing to see. Embarrassed, he apologized for staring and said he didn't mean to make her feel weird. That made her chuckle, and he apologized again for being too stiff. She teased him about being way too serious, and the rain kept pouring down around them. She figured it wasn't stopping anytime soon and got ready to leave. But he warned her that she'd get soaked, but she simply said that she was already drenched. And as she walked off, he introduced himself and asked for her name. She gives her name as Harlat, adding that a name like that should be more than enough for someone like her. That simple answer makes Naotsugu's heart skip a beat. Flustered, he glances away, and that's when he spots a dark shape moving through the rain, and it looks just like his brother. At the same time, Harlat also notices it and seems surprised. He asks if she knows who it is, and she quietly replies that it's someone from her past. The story then shifts to the next day with Naotsugu dropping by the local soba place, where he finds Jinya already there. Jinya brings up how rough the rain was last night, and Naotsugu nods in agreement. Afu overhears and casually asks if the two of them were out together. Naotsugu says they were all hanging out drinking, and jokes that Jinya drank like a bottomless well, which made him drink more than he meant to. Afu scolds Jinya, saying he should know when to quit next time, but Jinya points out he didn't force anyone to drink. Naotsugu agrees it was his own choice, but says it was still a great night out. The vibe was perfect until the storm came and ruined it. Afu then goes to take the next order, and Naotsugu turns back to Jinya and asks what he ended up doing after he left, since he was supposed to be looking for a job. Jinya says he picked up on an interesting rumor. Naotsugu raises an eyebrow and asks if it's demon-related. Jinya has a hunch it is, and says he's heading back to Asakusa again tonight to dig deeper. Back in the theater, the play carries on, but Miyaka has dozed off halfway through. On stage, Naotsugu is shown returning to Asakusa once more, carrying feelings he still hasn't sorted out. The rain hasn't let up. Just like last time, Harlat shows up to take cover in the same spot. She notices him and asks why he's there again. He tells her he's still uneasy about the shadow they saw the other night. She reminds him she already told him that it was just someone from her past. But Naotsugu can't help but wonder who she really is. She tells him bluntly that when it comes to a woman's history, especially a woman from the pleasure district, it's better not to dig around too much. Naotsugu apologizes for prying, and she tells him he's way too sincere. He admits that the real reason he came was just to see her again. She playfully asks why he didn't say so if he wanted to spend time with her, but with a straight face, he says that's not what this is about. He just wanted to see her. She realizes he's being honest and apologizes for the joke, saying he's really an odd one. But right then, they both notice that same shadowy figure from before. The figure remains still in the rain, and to Naotsugu, it looks exactly like his brother. Harlat stares at it too, quietly wondering why this figure from her past has suddenly appeared now. Naotsugu starts thinking that this man must have meant more to her than just some fleeting customer. Her voice held a warmth she couldn't hide, and even though she tried to seem composed, her trembling shoulders gave her fear away. The next morning, the scene shifts to Jinta sitting in the soba shop, staring at the table. Afu notices his gloomy mood and asks what's wrong. Jinta admits that he totally screwed up. He had the demon right there in front of him and still let it slip away, and he can't help but laugh at himself for it. Afu asks if he's going after it again, but he says he can't because the demon only shows up when it rains. Just then, Naotsugu walks into the shop and says he needs to speak with Jinta. He also asks Afu and the shopkeeper to stay and hear him out because he needs everyone's advice. He then admits he recently met a woman who's caught his interest. Right after that, Zenji and Natsu come in and place an order for 2 bowls of soba. They immediately notice the heavy vibe in the room and ask what's going on. Naotsugu tells them about Harlat, and Natsu is surprised because it's nothing like Zenji, who usually just fools around with random women. Zenji tries to steer the conversation and asks if Naotsugu is planning to win the girl over. Naotsugu says he's definitely intrigued by her and wants to understand her better. Natsu points out that their social standings are too far apart, and even if he does learn more about her, it might not help. But Naotsugu insists he wants to find out for himself before making any decisions, and Natsu admires how serious he is. Then Zenji suddenly gets an idea and shares a plan he swears will win Harlot's heart. He says that since she works on the street, all Naotsugu needs is for some thug to bother her, and then he can swoop in like a hero and save the day. Natsu immediately shuts the idea down, saying it's way too cheesy. But Zenji ignores her and goes on describing how Naotsugu would show up just in time to beat down the thug and win Harlot's heart. Natsu insists that it's way too outdated, and Jinta adds that thugs don't exactly pop out on cue in the real world. That's when Zenji grins and proudly reveals that he's the so-called thug in this little stunt. Everyone in the soba shop stares at him, clearly unimpressed. Zenji turns to the shopkeeper and asks if he has any better suggestions. The shopkeeper thinks for a moment, then says it's really just about putting in the time. If Naotsugu wants a place in her heart, he needs to approach it gradually, get to know her, let her get to know him. It takes patience, understanding, and a lot of small moments. And there's no magic trick or shortcut. He adds that it took him nearly 20 years to win over the woman he brought home, and Naotsugu nods, fully convinced. He decides to wait for Harlat again under the eaves, just like before. After Naotsugu heads out, Zenji looks over at the shopkeeper with a new sense of respect. The shopkeeper simply replies that it's just the voice of experience talking. Then he notices Afu looking a little uneasy and asks if he said something wrong. Afu says no, but something's been bothering her. According to Naotsugu, he first met Harlat 2 nights ago under the eaves when it was raining. But Jinta mentioned that he couldn't confront the demon either, since it only shows up when it rains. And yet, neither yesterday nor the day before had any rain, and the skies were clear. Later that night, Harlat returns to the same spot, stepping under the eaves again as the rain begins to fall. As she waits, she wonders if she'll see that man again. Her life hasn't been kind. Forced into a harsh life just to survive, she abandoned everything, including her home and family. But there was one person she never let go of, her brother, who treated her like she was someone worth protecting. The sparrow Kanzashi hairpin he once gave her, bought with coins saved through a life of hardship, had long since vanished. But the love she held for him had not. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind blew through, and the girl spotted that same figure again. To her eyes, it looked just like her brother, and it motioned for her to come closer. She froze in shock, unable to believe he was calling out to her, because her brother was already gone. Still, she ran straight toward it, calling out his name, but Naotsugu intercepted her just in time, grabbing hold of her and telling her she couldn't go to it. He pleaded with her to snap out of it, but she begged him to let her go, because her brother was calling. Naotsugu insisted there's no chance that thing was her brother, and deep down, she knew that too. Yet her legs kept pulling her toward it. He warned her that whatever that was, it wasn't even human. She may have loved that man from her past, but the creature standing there wasn't him, because that wasn't a person, it was a demon. Naotsugu then unsheathed his blade, ready to defend her. He recalled the oath he had made as a samurai to protect anyone in his lord's territory, and swore on his sword that this thing was not the man she once loved, begging her to trust him. She did, and he charged at the figure. but it dodged, and every blow he threw, the figure slipped past it effortlessly. The figure eventually drew its own blades and forced Naotsugu back. Even then, he didn't retreat. He clashed swords with the demon, and after a fierce skirmish, Jinta suddenly arrived. With a single, swift slash, Jinta struck the demon down, but Harlat couldn't tell who delivered the killing blow because of the lightning flashing through the storm. The rain faded along with the demon's presence, and she turned to Naotsugu, asking if he was alright. He said he was fine, then asked about her, and she replied that she was okay too, then added that he fought better than she expected. Jinta seconded that, but when Naotsugu tried to clarify that he didn't land the final hit, Jinta quickly cut him off. Naotsugu then turned to ask if they knew each other. Jinta confirmed it, so Naotsugu raised an eyebrow, wondering if he was one of her clients. She corrected him, saying that she was the one who had hired him, asking him long ago to deal with a demon on her behalf. She then asked Jinta if that shadowy figure really was a demon. Jinta explained it wasn't a full-fledged demon, it was a failed obsession, a cluster of souls too attached to the living world to move on. It didn't have a true form of its own, so instead, it shaped itself based on the strongest longing seen through the eyes of its observer. Naotsugu says that to him, the figure looked like his brother at first. But when he realized it was trying to take Harlat away, it changed into a shadowy, twisted shape. That surprises Harlat because she honestly believed she'd already let go of her brother completely. But Jinta quietly remarks that some memories stay with you, no matter how hard you try to erase them. The performance wraps up shortly after that, and Kaoru nudges Miyaka awake. She's disappointed that she missed almost everything, and later, the two of them are seen grabbing snacks at a nearby convenience store. Miyaka asks why Kaoru didn't try harder to wake her, and Kaoru says she did, but Miyaka was completely out cold. She offers to help write the assignment for her, and Miyaka hands her a bar of dark chocolate as thanks. Next, we jump to Kaoru back in class, handing the finished report to Miyaka. She says it's too bad Miyaka missed the show because it was actually amazing. They ask Jinta what he thought about it, and he admits it wasn't terrible. Though, he can't wrap his head around why Naotsugu's Ronin buddy was portrayed as such a useless mess. Kaoru argues that he did show up to save the day, even if Naotsugu was the one who ultimately beat the demon. But Jinta knows the truth didn't go down like that, and Harlat's version of the story clearly left something out. Kaoru just laughs it off, saying he's being dramatic. After all, Harlat was clearly in love with Naotsugu. She adds that the scene where Harlat, now married to Naotsugu, sits beside the Ronin's daughter was one of the best. And also Harlat had figured out the Ronin was a demon, but still acted like she didn't know. Jinta mutters that she really outplayed him back then, and the way they're talking about it now starts piquing Miyaka's interest. Kaoru mentions there's a book that covers it all, in case she wants to dive deeper. Miyaka seems intrigued by the idea, but Jinta says he'd rather read Harlat's actual memoir instead. He wants to see how she really described the Ronin. Kaoru reminds him that he said he was bitter toward her, but they all start realizing that might not be the whole truth after all. The scene then shifts to the year 1855, where we find Jinta in the thick of combat, cutting down a pack of demons with brutal precision. When the dust settles, he stands over the bodies, quietly admitting to himself that he doesn't even know when it changed. But at some point, slaying demons stopped fazing him. Still, with every strike, it's like the blade isn't just stained with blood. It feels heavier, like a piece of his own soul is darkening with each swing. Later, we see him collecting his payment for the job. The client apologizes for not being able to pay him more, then glances up at the sky, noting how beautiful the view is tonight, recalling how his lord used to admire scenes like this while enjoying his favorite drink. He says he plans to honor that memory with a grave and a pour of his lord's favorite liquor. After that, he quietly excuses himself, and the scene fades into the next morning. Jinta wakes up in his house to the sounds of his neighbors yelling, and when he checks, the husband is berating his wife, demanding she go buy more booze. The next cut shows Jinta out shopping with Afu. He tells her about the last demon hunt, explaining that he had to deal with a whole house crawling with them. She remarks that it must have been a rough night and offers to carry the bag of vegetables since he must be exhausted. But he says he's fine, and it's a day worth celebrating after all. As they walk, they pass a liquor shop with a crowd lined up to buy a brand called Yuki no Nagori, which seems to be the latest craze. Customers rush in to grab it, and Afu wonders if they should pick some up too. But Jinta shrugs it off, saying the place is too packed for him, and they keep walking. Soon, they're at the sober restaurant, where the day's special guest Zenji finally shows up. Natsu immediately scolds him for being late, and he explains that the shop was busy today. She brushes it off, saying it doesn't matter because this party is for him anyway, and now all they're waiting on is Naotsugu. A moment later, he shows up too, and the party finally kicks off. Zenji tries to give a speech, saying it's been 15 years since he started working at Sugaya, but Natsu cuts him off and tells him to knock it off with the speeches. Zenji laughs and shares the real news. He's been promoted to head clerk. He thanks everyone for coming to celebrate, and they all raise their glasses in congratulations. Then, the restaurant owner brings out a steaming pot of chicken hot pot, saying plain soba just won't do on a day like this. Afu pours Zenji a drink, and he recognizes it right away. Primo Kudari Zake. He's stunned and asks how she even managed to get something so rare, and she tells him Jinta went out of his way to get it just for him, and hearing that brings Zenji to the verge of tears. They all sit down to eat and drink, and after a while, Zenji remembers he brought something too. He pulls out a bottle of Yuki no Nagori, saying it's been the talk of the town lately. Even his boss has been drinking it non-stop. He figured today was the perfect time to share a bottle with everyone. Zenji starts to pour a cup, but Natsu grabs the bottle and pours it for him, reminding him that he's the guest of honor today. Zenji is moved by the gesture, thinking to himself that she used to be such a little punk, but she's clearly matured a lot. She brushes off his remark, saying it's his day anyway, and hands him the drink. But the second he takes a sip, Zenji spits it out. It's salty, it reeks, and it burns like hell going down. Naotsugu takes a sip too after seeing that reaction, and he agrees that it's intense, not something he'd ever call tasty. Jinta gets curious and takes a sip as well, and he says it's not terrible, but it's weak. Natsu questions if this is really the same drink everyone's been obsessing over, and Zenji swears this is what his boss has been knocking back. The shop owner tells them to just toss that stuff and drink some decent liquor from his stock instead, and they're more than happy to accept. The next morning, Jinta wakes up at home again, and hears the same argument echoing through the walls. The neighbor's wife is telling her husband to cut down on his drinking, but he's not listening to a word she says. Later that night, Jinta is crossing a bridge when he runs into Harlat. He says he's looking for work and asks if she has any leads. She tells him she does, but she's not sure if it's going to lead to anything solid. Lately, there have been all kinds of strange stories going around. A demon taking the place of a sick child, a group of demons hiding under a bridge, and a ghostly woman wandering the streets after dark. Jinta thinks the list is getting a little long, but Harlat says that's just the way things are now, so maybe it's all just fear playing tricks on people, and he realizes she's talking about the foreign ships anchored at Uraga. She says the emperor's slowly turning into a pet for the Americans, and when society gets shaky, evil always finds its way in, and that's the world they're living in now. She also brings up that Yuki no Nagori drink again. It's flying off the shelves, so it seems like folks are just drowning their worries in booze, and her customers won't stop bragging about getting their hands on it. Jinta asks if any of them mentioned how it tastes, and she says yeah, they've been saying it's so divine it could send someone straight to heaven. He tells her to look into that sake for him, and she asks if he thinks something's off. He says he hopes not, and she agrees to check it out. He then tells her to be careful, joking that Naotsugu would probably kill him if anything happened to her. Then snow starts falling as they part ways. The next morning, Natsu shows up at Jinya's place, and he's surprised she managed to track him down. She says Afu gave her a clue, and she figured he'd be holed up somewhere like this, close enough to the soba shop to still be in his comfort zone. She tells him he should have mentioned it earlier, and just then, shouting breaks out next door. She asks what that was, and he explains that it's just the neighbors arguing again because the dad's been drinking non-stop lately. Jinta asks her what brings her over, and she says she needs a favor. She takes a seat and explains that Zenji's been skipping work and getting hammered at a bar in Nihanbashi. Jinya's shocked to hear that, especially right after Zenji's big promotion. Natsu says he's been like this ever since the day after the party, drinking non-stop, day and night. Her dad's just about had it with him, and Jinta asks what she expects him to do. She says she's too nervous to march into a bar alone and wants him to come along as backup. She even offers to pay him if it helps, but he says there's no need for that and agrees to tag along. Cut to the bar. Natsu walks in and finds Zenji drinking by himself. She heads straight to him, and he asks what she wants. She snaps at him for ditching work and wasting time drinking, but he cuts her off, calling her a barking mutt. He adds that this is exactly why she's still single, and he doubts any guy would ever want to marry someone like her. That pisses her off, and she's about to let him have it. But Jinta steps in and stops her. Zenji tells him to stay out of it, but Jinta calmly tells him not to let the booze turn him into a complete jerk. But Zenji just scoffs and says Jinta's always rubbed him the wrong way ever since they first met. Jinta tells him to knock it off, and when Zenji tries to take a swing, Jinta ducks and drives a punch straight into his gut, knocking him out cold and forcing the booze out of his system. Natsu rushes to check on him, saying Jinta might have gone overboard, but he explains that Zenji needed to puke that liquor out. That's when he notices the bottle. Zenji had been drinking Yuki no Nagori. Suddenly, the other customers in the bar close in, not too happy with the scene Jinta just caused. One of them warns him not to start trouble here, but Jinta calmly tells Natsu to shut her eyes and let him handle it. A few of them rush him, but Jinta takes them down barehanded without breaking a sweat. Some of the others start chucking sake bottles at him, but he manages to deflect them and shield Natsu too. Just when one more guy lunges to hit Jinta from behind, a familiar jumps in and knocks the guy out. It doesn't stop there, it goes on to drop a couple more goons. Jinta finishes off the last guy standing, and Natsu quickly checks on Zenji, asking if he's okay. Jinta tells her he's just out cold, and then turns to thank Akitsu for the assist. Akitsu shrugs it off, saying Jinta didn't really need help, but Jinta admits it saved him some effort. Cut to Zenji waking up back at Sugeya. He looks around, confused about how he ended up there. Natsu brings him a cup of tea and is relieved he's finally awake. He slowly gets up, pieces of the bar fight coming back to him, and immediately apologizes. She asks if he's still hurting, and he admits it's still a bit sore. She sighs, saying she wishes Jinta had gone a bit easier on him. Zenji apologizes again for the awful things he said. She brushes it off, saying she knows better than to take a drunk man's words seriously, and she's sure he still respects her deep down. She tells him not to beat himself up over it, but he keeps apologizing, saying he doesn't know what came over him, and she agrees because he's never the type to throw punches around. He says he was blackout drunk and riding the high, but something felt wrong. Even when she showed up, he just got angrier, and he still doesn't know why he hated seeing Jinta so much. She tells him to take it easy for now, and that's when his boss walks in. The boss says he heard Zenji made a total fool of himself, and Zenji apologizes once more, and surprisingly the boss tells him he's getting one more chance. At the same time, Jinta and Akitsu are sitting in Jinya's room when the neighbors next door start arguing again over alcohol, like clockwork. Jinta glances at Akitsu and asks what he was even doing hanging around that bar earlier. Akitsu says something weird's been going on in Kyoto. Not long ago, he heard about a guy who murdered his own younger brother. That story alone wouldn't usually raise red flags, but ever since then, more violent stuff has been happening, back to back. It didn't sit right with him, so he started digging, and it turns out the victim in that first incident had brought home a weird type of sake for his brother, who drank it, then carried out the killing. Turns out, every case involved someone drinking booze, and in all of them, it was the same brand, Yuki no Nagori, and Akitsu's been trying to track its origin ever since. Later on, the two of them step out, and Jinta asks if Akitsu uncovered anything useful in Kyoto. He says all he got was a rumor about a mysterious woman who keeps showing up right before each incident. She doesn't sound like your typical alcohol seller though, so it might just be coincidence. Then Akitsu asks how Jinta plans to get more info on this sake, and Jinta says he'll just get people talking the old-fashioned way. Akitsu calls him a thug for that, but they press on and arrive at a sake warehouse. The second they get there, they spot blood outside the entrance and immediately head in. The inside's wrecked, the owner's dead, the place is torn up, and Jinta quickly sees that every bottle of Yuki no Nagori is missing. Akitsu notices that one part of the shop hasn't been touched. Judging by the setup, he figures that's where the Yuki no Nagori had been kept, so he guesses the mob that broke in was hunting for that liquor specifically. Jinta can't believe people are killing each other over some bottles of booze, but Akitsu reminds him that it's alcohol that makes people lose their damn minds. Just then, they both spot two demons lurking inside the wreckage. Without hesitation, they each take one down. After the brief clash, they both wonder what demons were doing here in the first place. Stepping back outside, they notice the snow falling again. It's been snowing like this every night lately, And for some reason, that cold, quiet snowfall puts a bad feeling in Jinya's chest. That concludes this episode. Thank you for watching. If you want to see the next part, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell.